Hey everyone, it's the Avocado Gamescast. This is episode 104, and I'm here with the Kappa today to analyze some recent industry happenings. We're going to be talking about Tango, Bungie, Game Informer, and much, much more. But before we get to that, Kappa, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. 104, huh? 104. It's like at least 500 hours of us out there.
Yeah, a lot, like multiple days of us just saying
Yeah.
God knows what.
You ever get bored for like an entire week? Just run the whole series.
Yeah, like if ever you're, supposed to be doing some chores and you you're about to do something stupid like mix chlorine, bleach, and ammonia,
Oof.
as one does when they're cleaning. Put on the podcast first, and maybe
Yeah.
you'll hear this episode warning you not to mix ammonia and bleach, and then you won't do it.
Or you passed out and like the kids going right over you.
Or you've inhaled so much chloramine vapor that you think it's a good idea to listen to the podcast.
That's our target audience. Someone who's passed out on chlorine.
I think that's just called death.
Yeah. Right at that break. We want you right at that cusp.
Yeah, right when you start to see the light, put on the
Pull
podcast.
back. Pull back.
Yeah, don't go into there. So I biked home from work today, as I often do. I have a pretty nice bike ride home. I get to bike through a park next to a body of water. There's a lot of birds along my route, so I get to see mallards and red-winged blackbirds and the occasional great blue heron. Really, really beautiful bike ride. I'm very fortunate. But one downside is there are lots of birds there because there's lots of bird food there. And what's one thing that birds eat a lot of? Insects.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say
Yeah.
bread, but I guess that's what we feed them. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
that's what
better.
we feed them. Don't feed
Don't feed
bread to
birds bread,
birds. It's
but
actually really, really bad for them. If you must feed a duck, feed them peas, not bread.
really?
Yeah, green peas. I mean, don't feed ducks just in general, but if for some weird reason you're compelled to do it, peas instead of white bread. White bread is really, really bad for them.
That's the kind of knowledge you get.
Yeah, that's the kind of knowledge you get listening to the Avocado Gamescast. Don't feed wild birds in general. So lots of insects along the way. So you know how when you take your car out for a ride in the evening and then you come back and then your grill is just covered with squashed insects.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, imagine that but on a bike. That was my experience this evening. Like I came home and
Yeesh.
not only was my like well, they're covered in dead bugs. Not all the bugs were dead yet. So I was like, off the bags that I attached to my bike, I was pulling off semi-dead insects. There were insects like half dead on my face, on my polo
Oh.
shirt. Yeah, this was pretty gross. Speaking of half-dead insects that refuse to die, Randy Pitchford's new favorite movie just debuted in theaters.
What is he trying to like spin this as? Like, oh, it's not really my movie. You guys love my games. This movie. Oh no, I'm not proud of this thing. Like, isn't that kind of like the weird tone he's taking right now?
To be honest, I have not been paying much attention
Yeah.
to
Oh,
at
you're not
Duval
missing
Magic
much.
on Twitter
Yeah.
because I get my daily dose of magicians from Blue Sky and other platforms right now. But like, I would not be surprised if Randy Pitchford were trying to distance himself from something he had formerly championed. It does seem like a
Yeah.
pattern with the man. Distancing himself from everything from aliens, colonial marines to Duke Nukem Forever to USB sticks full of squirt porn.
Yeah.
Like,
Quite
this
a
is a
reach
clown of
into
a
that.
man
Yeah.
who financed, or I should say financed, provided the IP for a pretty terrible video game movie that everyone hates. So, like, it's all part of his MO.
Yeah. That's the feeling I get is that this is just another like there's been so many video games. I felt like we were turning a corner almost, like with the Last of Us show and a couple other things, and this just felt like a step way back in the wrong direction. Even from the get go, I think every person who saw that trailer was like, "This, what is this?" I mean, even huge fans of the game, I don't think were really feeling this. So, um, I don't think it had any positive word of mouth. It had one of the lowest cinema scores I've ever seen. It was like a D plus,
Yeah,
something
that's
like
what I
that, C
heard.
minus. Yeah, I mean, like they grade that thing on a curve. Like you are not a C plus student and doing well if that's your cinema score. But yeah, I think it was like one of the lowest I've ever seen. So, man, it's been a rough go for them. I think as of today, it's and probably not gonna make much more than this, but I think it's only made $8 million, which is disastrous. It's like the kind of amount that like studios make and then close right afterwards. So, I don't
I
know,
heard
man.
higher than that. I forget the exact figure that was cited, but yeah, it's not gonna. Uh, it's probably make back its production budget, but it's not gonna make back its marketing budget.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
This thing is
What did they always
flopped.
say? Like double it, like double it for the like
Yeah, for like their
if the
biggest
production budget
films.
was like 10, then the marketing's 10, right? Isn't it? General like wisdom, just
Yeah, for like your biggest blockbusters, for smaller
yeah.
films, it's generally less than double. I think it's less than double in this case. It's not gonna break even. Like,
I know we're not really like we both watch a lot of movies. We're not really usually talk about movies, but it's been a weird year for movies. There's been some real sleeper hits, some big flops. Maybe one of the biggest flops I've ever seen with Madam Web, right?
oh
Borderlands is
yeah,
definitely up there. And then like a movie like Longlegs is making tons of money, and it like all the conventional wisdom is people are tired of this, people are tired of that. And I don't know. Then Deadpool and Wolverine makes $1 trillion. I think people are just kind of tired of nobody's going to the theaters to see the same old stuff. You gotta bring it a little bit.
for my part, I have not been to a movie theater since 2020.
I used to go like 3 or 4 times. At least 3 or 4 times a month. There was times I was going 2 or 3 times a week. And now it's so expensive. It's like everything that everybody says about movies. It's just like I go there with the kids and it's like $80 just to get in the door. And then it's like, oh, they want a soda and a popcorn. Well, $44. And we'll try to sell them a little weird Deadpool cup or something that's also $8 on top of that. And it just feels like it's like prices you would see at a stadium. And I know everybody's complained about movie prices forever, but this seems like the next level. I don't know how they stay in business. And the theater I go to, terrible. Like the signs were out. Like when you walk in, like which sign, which hey, this is theater A, it's showing whatever stuff like that. Sign completely out. You have no idea where you're going. Like, just this is the worst, man. I don't know. I don't. I feel like there's a lot of lessons that video games can learn from movies, and I starting to think it's kind of goes both ways because um, there's a lot of high concept, high budget stinkers getting made, and Borderlands has got to be top of the list. Production hell and everything I understood, but man, I don't think anybody. I don't know if it would have made more money as a tax write-off at this point. So,
You wish
um,
they'd Warner Brothers did.
yeah, I mean maybe right. Like, I mean that this hurts the IP more than anything. Maybe not the game if people really could able to separate it from the movie, but some real head scratchers. I mean, right from the casting to the tone to just everything I've seen about it, really weird.
The one positive. Oh, I see two positive reviews. Okay, I'll
Oh,
read the pull
two.
quotes
Well then,
from the
okay.
two positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's currently a 9% fresh score.
9? Ooh,
9%, yes. 9% of reviews are positive. So the one from John Mendelson of Comic Book Review is, it's not as bad as you think, but it's not good either. 6 out of 10. And from
Give that
Fausto
man a
Fernandez
monster.
of Fotogramas, I believe this is translated from Spanish, Borderlands is not a quote unquote good movie, but it is a prime example of how intelligently non intelligent life existed and exists in unintelligent science fiction, where the misses are more interesting than the occasional hits. Now that is damning it with faint praise.
That yeah, like, hey, you accidentally made a bomb and that's interesting. It's not exactly the kind of like you know Maybe it's like encouraging that, like in the days of like hyper, focus group movies and testings and stuff like that, that something like this still can sneak out. But I don't know if I'd call that a positive.
What else do I have that's positive? From Abby Bernstein of Assignment X, who gave it a B minus, a quasi decent video game adaptation.
Whoa,
From Troy
that's
Ribeiro
glowing.
of the Free Press Journal, who gave it 2.5 out of 5. Visually, the film does a commendable job replicating the cel-shaded look of the games, but this stylistic achievement only serves to highlight the film's overall emptiness. I love that these are the positive reviews. This is so
great,
good.
But it makes the movie look worse in comparison.
This is what's positive about it.
You know what's interesting is because like reading that, there's one thing I do almost kind of get is that I don't know if you saw Madam Web, which obviously
I did not.
right? But it's so technically incompetent, like with the ADR and like the scenes not matching up and the characters not really talking about their mouths not moving, just real weird things like technical incompetence. It's edited very oddly and like kind of stilted. I almost kind of get what they're saying because Madam Web was a disaster in both like areas, right? It's technically awful and as a movie awful. So maybe this one's like, hey, you got halfway there, but with the wrong half. Sorry, try again.
You had all the right footage and a competent editor.
Yeah.
That gets you some points, I would guess. Because we've all seen like really incompetently made movies, and not just the kind of stuff that appears on Mystery Science Theater.
Are there rumors as to like what the Eli cut was? Kind of like before, I guess, reshoots, because this had like monumental like reshoots like that have been unheard of before, right? So is anybody out there whispering like, oh, there's a the equivalent of like a Borderlands Snyder cut out there, or is this just kind of this is it? This is what we had to do to save it.
I don't know.
Nah.
I would be interested to see a 4:3 cut of Borderlands. So like playing it on an old CRT monitor.
Oh yeah.
That would be.
Borderlands, like I think about like the starting cinematic stuff. There's a little bit of something there. It's a cool world, but yeah, it's asking a lot to. Especially, what's kind of weird is after Furiosa bombed, I was like, oh man, maybe people just aren't in the mood for that, kind of apocalypse stuff. But wow,
we say that, and then Fallout, the TV series on Amazon Prime, was a huge hit.
Yeah.
But that was competently made, and I have some reservations about it. I didn't like adore it, but it was very well made, and people flocked to it for a good reason. They reward things that are entertaining, that show some level of technical and storytelling competence.
Yeah, well acted, well shot, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was all there, all the ingredients. Like that is a solid. Like, at least for me, a solid B+ of a show, just because they showed up and did the work and did it well. Yeah. And people will show up for that. You don't need greatness to achieve something in cinema. And I don't know, getting 9% fresh reviews and expecting you're going to earn back your budget, maybe for Transformers, but it's not going to work for Borderlands.
Ripperoni.
Remember what song?
Ripperoni. I was surprised to see that. Like, I haven't played. Oh boy, I haven't played Tiny Tina's, but I think that's not like part of the canon. I think it's like a side story. But I was surprised that they kind of went with the characters they did. I mean, Roland is like kind of the gruff, no nonsense soldier. Now he's Kevin Hart. Tiny Tina is the savior, from what I can gather, of the planet, rather than kind of being like a funny, almost cameo type character. Just a lot of like that kind of stuff where I don't know if they kind of understood what they were going with the game, or just didn't care, or were kind of told no, we're going youthful on this or something like that. But I don't know. Not that the game has like a perfect narrative either, but it's weird that you're not really making either side of the fan base happy with that, where you're making the changes that they probably don't want to see,
I'm thinking what the thinking of executives was that Kevin Hart is a big draw.
Yeah.
Or at least he was a draw at the time that this movie was in development. and they thought they'd get butts and seats with Kevin Hart.
Yeah, and Jack Black's kind of a similar, spot, but like Claptrap again, just kind of a joke of a character. You know what I mean? Has a couple funny lines here and there, but I don't know if you need to spend kind of Jack Black money on Claptrap for that. You know?
Yeah, you spend Jack Black money on like you want to make it worth it. You get him for like a pivotal character in a Double Fine game, right? Like that's Jack Black at his best. Because that's the kind of writing that really suits his personality, like that really big,
let him go
almost
like,
larger
real
than
broad
life.
with it.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, Claptrap's a little more like cheeky.
Yeah,
That's not really the Black Jack brand.
works very well in like short bursts, but you wouldn't watch a whole Claptrap movie. It's like in the games, like, oh, here comes Claptrap. Okay, get your one line, get out of here. But yeah, it's well, I don't have strong feelings about the Borderlands series. Honestly, I think for me, what kind of pushed me off of it was less the story in the game, though. I thought the story was at least kind of interesting, and they had some cool story beats. But it's kind of weird because like there's always like can we make video games movies? It's just not a thing. It's like no, you absolutely can. It's just I think maybe one of our first episodes, I said that I thought Assassin's Creed would make the most like perfect video game adaptation ever, and look how that turned out.
And then Michael Fassbender and what was it, Marion Cotillard?
Yeah.
And they shot up and made something
But I mean, like,
not that great.
That's some like juice behind it. That they had some actors. They had some. I can't remember who directed, but it looked all great on paper. And then wow. So maybe they can't just make game movies and just give up. That's gotta be a show. And then Halo got canceled. And I actually was getting into that show, so I was bummed about that.
Yeah, this as soon as it starts improving,
Yeah.
that's the time to throw it in the trash.
Man, that's TV for you.
At least we'll get more Fallout in a little bit, and the second and final season of Arcane this fall, which apparently mostly just leaked online. I don't know. I haven't been following that.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I didn't watch it, but I saw that it had leaked. I was kind of surprised. I mean, Fallout I think might be around for a while. They've got some stories to go with in Fallout, and one of the big successful things I think that Fallout is kind of teaching, and Halo kind of did this. You don't have to follow the exact story in the world if you get the atmosphere and the feel right, and then kind of run with it. I think what Halo, where their mistake was, is that they actually had Master Chief in it. You know what I mean? So there was a little bit of disconnect, but Fallout just feels right, honestly. And
I wish they'd gone with a completely different Spartan. You can cover
same.
a lot of the same beats. You can still cover the fall of Reach.
Yeah. Which they kind of did in the second season, and it worked actually really well because they kind of stuck with the stuff where Chief wasn't for most of it, and they kind of told it more like an on the ground level with the female Marine character. I can't remember what her name was. She was like the medic. Then like at the end, like she kind of goes on the missions and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that show was going somewhere. And then well, I think Paramount's falling apart anyway. That's probably like,
oh yeah, like they're trying to sell the part of the company to Skydance. That's the whole mess of
and
things.
Probably looked at the balance sheet, was like, whoa, what's this show? Get rid of this thing. Costs a lot of money.
But we will get to studios being sold to other studios a little bit later in this episode. Let's chat about what we've been playing. Kappa, what have you been up to in games?
I have been playing Diablo 4.
Oh no, you've gone back.
It's still boring. I don't know what I'm missing with this game. Like a lot of things where it's like I just need to get through the beginning, right? So I rolled a rogue and I got to level 30, which I feel like is a decent chunk of seeing the game, right? I was like, it's just boring. I don't know how to describe it. Like, a lot of the abilities are less flashy, and there's a lot more like granularity to the stats and stuff that I just don't enjoy. A lot of live service games get this kind of like currency bloat or like this like system bloat. I don't know really what to call it, right? But it's like, hey, it's not just a cool sword drops and you equip it and you use it. No, there's like, is it a unique with double blessed and Dariel's wisdom on it. Well, if it doesn't have this, this aspect, then it doesn't do this, and then it disenchants into this. So you're better off just getting rid of it and feeding it into the whatever, because later on these things, grow into this, and this experience level is your Paragon tree, and then your Paragon tree feeds into your legendary statuses, which unlock new rune words. You know what I mean? It's like all this shit, like as you're playing a live service type game, makes sense, right? Like you beat, this season and you get all these drops and all these weapons, and the next season you're kind of like improving them, so you're not always starting from scratch, because that's what a lot of people hated about MMOs. So I think live service games kind of like dip a toe into it, like, hey, you don't got to get rid of your gear if you do all this crap. You know what I mean? Like, just do all this crap and you can carry your gear forward.
What I think this ends up doing, though, is if you create all these systems and there's kind of an optimal route to get through them in terms of managing your gear, and you don't pursue that optimal route, you start to feel like you screwed up.
Yep, and then it's like, okay, well now I don't have a ton of gold, but the gold I have I'm spending to respect, because I found out the thing that I thought would be cool sucks. So now I'm just looking up a build. I'm just doing what everybody else does with my build, and it's telling me to chase.
You're just playing the meta at the end.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And that's unfortunate, because Diablo, I mean, I'm sure I played a lot of Diablo 2, a lot. And I don't really remember there being a ton of metas other than being like, oh, hey, you can do this really weird, yelling thing with your barbarian. It still works fine if you just want to run around and hit stuff with your swords, though. It's not like you can't play the game, more or less, right? But it's just like, check out this weird build, check out this fun thing you can do, or, at higher levels or higher, I don't know, tournament level PvP. I'm sure it was different, right? But like, I remember playing a druid that just like had a hurricane around me, and I would just walk, just everything would fall over. And it was like, yeah, maybe I can't do that on like the hardest difficulty of the game, but it was fun as shit just to run around with my buddies and have everything in a circle around me die. But yeah, so I think a lot of people talk about with live service games. I hear it a ton, obviously with Destiny, but the new player experience, or the people who are just getting in, 5-6 seasons in, what does it feel like? And for me, it's like an absolute mess of like words. It's like they just spew words at you, and you're leveling your season pass, and you've got collections that are unlocking, and you've got a title and a codex of power and challenges, and like, it's just all these like things that seem like, probably like when somebody wrote them down, it's like, or like when you were experiencing it organically as you're playing, it's like, oh cool, they added this, to the battle pass or whatever. But when you're getting into the game, it just throws so much at you, and you have no idea if any of this shit is important or not, right? So okay, well, I picked up a topaz. Okay, well, what is that for? Okay, it's a gem, I can sock it. Okay, cool, I'm familiar with that. But if I do this with all these gems, I can, use it to do this, unlock this key, and then this key opens a chest that occasionally randomly drops that allows me to fight a pit boss. So it's just the way it all builds on each other. What it was probably intended to do was, hey man, if you've been playing this game since launch nonstop, you probably got a trillion topazes that you can't do anything with, right? So if you dump them into this, you'll get better stuff. But then at some point, that dump it into this, you'll get better stuff, became the optimum thing to do with it instead of the old way, right? So now nobody talks about what to do with the old way. You just do it this new way. So I'm saving up these things that I feel like I should be using, but everybody's like, no, save it. Don't use it until you're level 90 and then do this thing with it. So meanwhile, I'm running around like barely being able to punch stuff, because I'm like, well, do I do this? Do I equip this? Do I do this? Like, do I disenchant this? Do I unlock the power word or whatever? And it's like, it kind of creates a lot of indecision, like, and I'm constantly tabbing out to be like, okay, is this thing any good, or what should I do with this, or what does this thing even do? What is this key I need? And on top of that, the combat sucks. So like, you know what I mean? Like, it's still the same clicking shit, right?
Yeah.
So like in Destiny, I can forgive a lot because the gunplay is fantastic, right? So like, okay, well, yeah, hey, my character's got to go grind some more dungeons that I've done a million times, but it's okay because I got this new cool weird gun, and it feels good when I'm shooting. Like, it feels so much better. Whereas in Diablo, right, you're always just upping stats, right? So I'm using basically the same abilities because that's my build, because that's what I've socketed all this stuff, and I can't really afford to change it, Um, but it
Whereas the
doesn't feel
game
like
like Destiny just lets you switch out your weapon. If you want to try a
right.
different kind of gun that fires completely
Eh,
differently, you can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, and it makes the game itself feel different, right? Whereas like
Yeah.
with my Diablo 4 Rogue, if I'm using a crossbow or a short bow, it doesn't really feel any different. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm shooting a little bit faster, but like it doesn't feel like I'm, you know what I mean? Like engaging the game differently. It's just like, nope, shoot a little bit faster, cool. But so
Yeah, like
um
if you go through Destiny with a melee weapon and it goes out
yeah,
into third person, you're literally playing a completely different feel than,
right.
shooting a gun.
Yeah.
And like we'll talk about problems with Destiny later, but like the core gameplay loop is at least keeping people compelled,
Oh yeah.
and offering variety in a way that Diablo never seems to have really cracked.
Yeah, and I think instead what you end up with Diablo is these like incredibly complex, like like if you were to go to like a character build for Diablo, it's not like, yeah, here's what you put your stat points in. You know what I mean? It's like, this is the ring you need to get. It drops from this guy. You have to do on torment level 1 or above, and you have to beat the boss using this aspect. You know what I mean? Like there's incredibly specific things to do that you don't really see in a lot of the other live service games. I don't know much about like maybe Warframe or something, but MMOs generally are like, go here, kill this boss. This thing may or may not drop. Diablo is like, on the fourth Thursday of a month, if you enter this thing may happen, and if you've got this thing equipped and these items, like it's very much more like involved in itself. And I don't know I don't know where that goes, right? Right, like as like a
Yeah.
series, or where does Diablo kind of like fit? And I think my guess is that they're trying to suck people in with these seasons, where like your character is kind of like a one and done, right? You make a character for that season, and then it's gone. But I don't know what that means in terms of like how people want to experience the game. And I think they walk that back. I'm playing the game. I'm not even 100% sure, like, because at the beginning it was like, hey, do you want to roll a seasonal character? You can play the game like regular, but it's also just for this season, right? So that's what I chose. But I don't know what that means. I mean, like, does this character explode in like 6 months or what? So
I think the real problem is even if you what it meant, the way Blizzard operates now, you have no guarantee that that's what they're going to commit to long
yeah,
term. So maybe you think right now it means, oh, it's a seasonal character, but I'll be able to come back to them in 2 years if I want to replay my old character. And that might be Blizzard's thinking right now. And then 6 months from now, they'll be like, wait, we're changing everything. We're nuking all our seasonal
yeah,
characters and replacing them with, I don't know, puppies or something.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's something Blizzard
And
might do.
if you log in and do this, like, a quest, you can keep the character or something. You know what I mean? Like, they always kind of do that. Like, that was the big thing in WoW. Like, oh yeah, you got it. If you want to keep your, this thing, you got to log in and everything. And so they kind of draw you back in, but not really. I don't know, really weird. I like the world of Diablo, like that kind of. There's not a lot of that other types of games that really do that kind of like horror, apocalypse world.
Yeah.
Um, so I like the setting. I like the characters. Generally, it's a fun world, and the story is kind of fine. It's pretty good, but the combat is so bad. And you know what's weird? Like I've been thinking about this. Like more and more, I find myself getting into RPGs, kind of like maybe not like the end of their life, but towards it. Because I got
Yeah.
burned bad by Baldur's Gate, right? Just straight up burned. So I've kind of been thinking about like, hey, a lot of these RPGs, I want to get to them like at the end of their cycle, right? So Diablo's not there. I mean, it's a mature game, right? Thing fucking crashes all the time, like all the time. I go into town, I get like 1 frame per second, and like I'm like, it's like a slideshow, and it looks like it's showing me somebody else's screen or something. Just the weirdest shit. Like the game never feels like it's not gonna just dump me to desktop for some reason. No idea why. I don't really, I've run 99% of games with no issues at all, but Diablo just dumps me to desktop whenever the hell it feels like. So
It, I mean, this is the same studio that did that horrible Warcraft remaster.
oh yeah, 3. Woo,
Yeah.
that is a stinker. I'm glad you mentioned that one, because yeah, that one is terrible.
Yeah, they have not been able to deal with technical issues as well as they used to be able to. It's probably in part because that studio has bled a lot of talent
Oh yeah.
due to the working conditions they've had over the years. And, like, they just cannot seem to catch a break right now. I mean, World of Warcraft seems to be doing just fine,
Yeah.
but everything else they touch seems to turn to shit right now.
Yeah.
Like, Overwatch is in a really, really bad spot, to the point that they seem to be trialing going back to 6 on 6. And it's like,
That is
why did you even
interesting.
make
Yeah.
Overwatch 2?
That is really interesting to hear that you know what I mean? Slowly turning the game back into Overwatch is definitely gonna, you're not exactly gonna prove your haters wrong. Like, hey, that shit we told you. Yeah, we were right. You know, that's kind of the feeling I'm getting right now, honestly.
Remember when Overwatch 2 was supposed to have single player and co op content?
Yeah, whatever happened to that?
Yeah, that's not happening anymore. I mean, we this announcement happened like months and months ago. But like, if I never got into Overwatch, but if I were an Overwatch player right now, I would be pissed, or I would no longer be playing Overwatch. One of the
Yeah,
two.
doesn't it? It feels like they took away the game that you could have, and they ripped it out from under you, and they replaced it with a game that didn't have all the stuff, and hoped, I guess, that you wouldn't notice and you'd play this game. But they're like, oh, but we have to do it because it's 5 on 5, and it's this and it's that, you know. And then look at it now. They basically slowly made it back into Overwatch 1. Really weird.
They've also managed to completely kill the esport that surrounded it. No one talks about Overwatch League anymore.
Yeah.
That whole thing is a mess. And, I feel for the dev team. They probably have not had the best leadership on this project. Their ambitions for the the PVE content, probably they could never have brought them to fruition. But that's not players' problem. Like, players are justifiably mad. So I don't know. Hopefully, Blizzard can find their way again. I would hope with a new IP. I think they kind of need to leave Overwatch and Warcraft behind for a bit. Maybe a StarCraft 3. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I hope they try something else to turn things around a little bit. So I recently played a game. Like, we're staying with a downer of an episode.
It really is, right?
I mean, I could talk about Dungeons of Hinterberg, which I've continued playing and is delightful and very, very good.
I installed that with the intention to play it because I actually really I think you sold me on it because when I saw the game in action, it looked so good. I don't think that the screenshots at all on at least on the Xbox Marketplace that they have do that game justice compared to what the video looks like. So I'll definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, like, if you're not into hack and slash gameplay, I don't know how much is going to click with you. But the vibes are immaculate. The art style is incredible. It looks great in motion. It's charming. It's well paced. Puzzles are well designed. Like, everything about this is just really well made. Speaking of something that's less well made, Clickolding.
Yeah, I read this when you sent me the read ahead. What the heck, man?
Yeah. So if you want to know what this is referencing, look at the game title written out in all caps and see what
Yeah,
that looks like to you.
mess with the kerning and you've got it.
Yeah. So the premise is that this is okay. This game has been discussed recently, I think, on a lot of podcasts and a lot of like games criticism circles as an interesting game. And not to like dump on other critics, a lot of people who I highly respect like this game. I don't really think it's worth discussing. I
Really?
don't think it's very good or very deep.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason I'm talking about it here is to kind of provide an alternative viewpoint on this. So the premise is that you are in a motel room in first person, and you're standing next to a guy who's wearing a weird dog mask. And you're holding, you know, those clickers that you sometimes see, like students during the summer sitting in lawn chairs on the side of the road and they're counting like pedestrians, cyclists, or motorists as they pass by.
Yeah, or like the guy, like to see how many people are in a line. Like if he needs to, like cap the line at a Comic Con, click, click, click,
Yeah,
click. Okay, the line's capped. That kind of guy. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like one of those clickers. That's what you're counting with, and you have to click that thing 10,000 times
Okay.
over the course of roughly an hour.
Oh,
And
really?
you're not just, yeah. So this is like, I would recommend play this game wearing a wrist brace,
Yeah, it's a lot of
which I
clicks,
did
man.
not do. And I regretted it. So you have to click 10,000 times, but while you're doing this, the guy in the mask will tell you to do stuff like open the blinds and click, close the blinds, now change the temperature in the room, now sit down, now stand up, now face me, now turn away, ooh yeah, like that.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, am I missing something? Okay, maybe I don't quite get what cuckolding is, but like that seems more kind of like domination, right? So is that kind of the thing that's going on? Is you're being
Yeah, it's a
dominated
lot
into
more
clicking?
like it's much more of like a prostitution metaphor, or more broadly
Okay.
a labor metaphor. Like, a lot of us have
Yeah, do
stupid
the menial
jobs where,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, your boss is like, do this, do that. Yeah, it's not really a cuckolding metaphor. There is
Yeah.
no
Okay.
one being cuckolded here, for better or for worse.
Gotcha.
But like, without spoiling anything, there's really not much more to it than that. Like, once you get the basic metaphor, that's really all there is.
Yeah. It kind of seems like it's very surface
It's
deep.
extremely surface to the point of being kind of frustrating, because an art game like this that isn't fun to play,
Yeah.
it really, really hinges on its thematic depth and specifically its ending. Yeah, there's nothing there. This is
Yeah.
a
'Cause,
really
would
empty game.
you're not walking out of that game being like, oh wow, this really taught me something about myself. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah,
like, oh
and like I have played indies that were deliberately frustrating at times, but that had an ultimate message, or that at least were trying to say or do something. And like a game that where all it has to say is, you know, isn't isn't working for the man kind of like being a prostitute? It's not all that deep.
yeah. Oh, you got us. Yeah. I mean, like
Oh yeah, like
it's
I
kind of
mean,
like what's that subreddit? Like I'm 14 and this is deep. Like it's that. It's
oh
that
yeah,
like
pretty
surface.
much.
Yeah, it's that surface level. Like yeah, it does suck to work. I mean, you gonna offer any suggestions or just tell us what we all already know? And it's nope. It's just that deep. It's just work sucks. And
It's
Blink
and like
182 knew that, and they were dumb.
I don't know, if you're playing it, especially to an audience that's been, say, sex work positive for a while, it just feels really brutish and nasty.
Mhm.
Like, there's nothing here, unfortunately. And thus far, frankly, my least favorite game of the year.
Wow. Woo.
Yeah, I did not enjoy this at all. Like, I didn't hate it. I haven't played a game I hate yet this year. I just disliked this.
Yeah.
This is not
Finishing
American
it, or what do you
Arcadia, my
think?
friends. Sorry?
You finishing it?
Oh, I finished it already. It's only
Oh,
like an
okay.
hour
Yeah,
long.
because I was gonna say 1 hour. I don't know if there's like more gameplay to that, but
There is a secret once you complete the game that I'm not going to spoil, and it adds nothing.
oh,
It's extremely sophomoric. It's like you said, I'm 14 and this is deep.
yeah.
So yeah, sorry, cuckolding didn't do it for me.
Click.
Did I just say cuckolding didn't do it for me? But
Take it
cuckolding
back.
definitely
It's
did.
late.
I'm single. I cannot be cuckolded. I'm sorry. Clickholding did not do it for me. So yeah, you play? Have you been playing anything else?
Yeah, the only other thing I've been kind of in and out on, I don't know where I've kind of gotten back into some of these older games, but I dipped back into Civ 6 a little bit, and now that's a
Ooh,
good example
nice.
of like, hey, this game is out. And what I decided to do instead was kind of jump into a lot of the mods, right? There's some pretty good ones, of course. The workshop for Civ 6. I think this what launched it was they announced Civ 7 as a man, I don't remember they announced it now, but yeah, Civ 7's on the way, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, let's see what's kind of going on in the old Civ 6 world. And they've been at it. There are a lot of cool mods out there. So obviously a lot of anime civilizations. So if you want to play like, I don't know, if I were to go to the workshop right now, there's probably, if you want to build the Dragon Ball Kame House World Wonder, there's a mod for you, right? But there's some Game of Thrones ones, which I thought was really cool, like has a good
Of course.
idea of the civilization, right? And then a couple of the other ones I checked out was they took a lot of the ones that are in the city. I think they're called like free cities in the game itself. They took a lot of those and they made them like actual civilizations. And some of the mods are more thought out, I guess, than other ones. But I do like some of the ones where they were like, how would this civ play as if it was a like a full-on civilization instead of just a city state. And one of the cool ones I've played, there was one it's the Knights of Malta. And you play like kind of that, like how would they have come into like almost like the modern era, and you play as Jean de la Valette, and I thought that was kind of cool. But some of them have like actual like different units and stuff. Some of them are just literally like, hey, this is just you are this civ, but doesn't really do it. But this one has everything. It has unique buildings and unique units and stuff like that. So I like to play my civs a little more like turtley, I think, than most, and the Malta civ was perfect for that.
Because you're like
But yeah,
actually on the archipelago and
well,
above
no,
the
not
rocks.
that, but also their what this guy did for their class ability, I thought was or their civ ability, right? Is if you build an encampment or a fort, it gives culture and faith, right? So like you can basically like dig in and create little pockets of like culture and faith, and so you don't get pushed back because you're using that area for the military improvements, which in civ sometimes you want to like do it on like your borders, and if you're not generating a lot of culture, those borders can shift and change and you can lose that stuff. So I thought that was kind of a smart way to fix that. To me it was a really annoying problem, but that was a little neat thing to do there.
Yeah, it sounds like they've done something really interesting with like
The
varying
mods,
up
yeah.
how these civilizations work compared to the base game.
Keeping that game alive has got to be like a labor of love at this point too. Labor of love at this point, because I don't think it's really, it had its heyday, but it seemed like it came and went real fast. So I'm glad that there's people sticking with it, because I think Civ is one of those things that it deserves to hang around until the new one comes out, which is right around the corner. But I really enjoy being able to slip back into that one now and then.
Yeah, sounds like it's a lot of fun, and I always love what they do with the mods for Civ, and like in adding all these other properties, kind of as like playable civilizations, or they'll do
Hmm.
like a total conversion in the world of some anime property that the nerds are into. So always enjoy seeing stuff like that. So there are two more things that I want to talk about. Speaking of going back into old games,
Uh
yeah, I've been going back to RollerCoaster Tycoon.
oh man, whew, great game. That is
Yeah,
awesome.
specifically, there's a version of RollerCoaster Tycoon called RCT Classic that combines most of RCT1 and RCT2, and you're effectively playing RCT1 with RCT2 mechanics. It has all the expansions and all that content. It was originally built for mobile devices, and they put it up on Steam. OpenRCT2 effectively takes the mobile friendly interface and gives you back the classic interface, fixes a few other things, adds the ability to take like giant screenshots of your entire park, adds like multiplayer support, things like that. Really fantastic mod work that they've done. So I've been playing it through the OpenRCT mod, and yeah, this game still rules. Like
Yeah.
the basic gameplay loop of RCT1 has not been improved
Yeah.
since the game came out. What was it, 95?
Because
Whenever it came out?
I think one of the things about Roller Coaster Tycoon, and that I think maybe Planet Coaster missed a little bit, is it's got a cool way of filling in every area with exactly the kind of stuff you want. And yeah, there's a lot going on there, and the sim part I think has never really hit for me as much as like some of the design part. But I know you can get into that. I mean, changing the price of like literally everything in there, right?
Oh,
Um,
yeah. I get in there and I start messing around with
yeah. So
prices.
for you, it's probably totally different for me, So, but yeah, I don't think I've ever had a bad time just playing RCT as it is.
Yeah, like it's super well set up, still super in depth, still have like it's still simple enough that you can understand all the moving parts while having the depth that you can tinker with.
Mhm.
And I really like what you said about filling out every space in the park, because that is exactly what I do. Like,
Yeah.
you fill everything with scenery, you put paths going through loops of coasters, which is probably super dangerous in real life, but you could do it in this video game. You make coasters intertwine with each other to make their excitement rating go up. You like place rides on top of other rides. You like make stacks of rides. You can do all sorts of cool stuff in that game, and I really, really still enjoy playing it.
Yeah, every playthrough feels just different enough too, where I really like making a park based on like a central design,
Yeah,
and Planet Coaster gives you the tools to do that, but then I think kind of pushes you towards the workshop, which isn't bad, right? Like we were just talking about modding, but I think it does kind of push you more towards the workshop to kind of fill in those gaps. Whereas RCT is like, no, like it's all here. Figure out what you want to do, and it's in the game. So, um, but yeah,
for sure. Speaking of Planet Coaster, I'm actually kind of excited for Planet Coaster 2 because the one thing RCT 1 and 2 don't do very well is water parks.
hmm
I mean, they do it poorly because they
yeah,
just don't do it at
they
all.
kind of try to snap it together, and it never works. Yeah,
RCT 3 actually has water slides in the soaked expansion, but I
that's
have
what I've
never
noticed
really
though too.
messed
Yeah,
around with it. So, like, if they can do that, but for Planet Coaster, maybe they've got something cooking. I don't know.
yeah,
I would really like to try my hand at building a water park, because, like, I also love water parks almost as much as I love theme parks, and I would love to, like, try my hand at building different kinds of water slides going down hills. Like, my dream is to, like, build a virtual version of something like Typhoon Lagoon.
really.
Yeah, just because I think
Kind of
that,
like you got a little bit of everything, like the kiddie area, the like all that kind of stuff.
yeah, because that whole concept of that park is so well designed with like the big central pool and like the mountain around it and all like the surrounding slides kind of forming an arc around the big wave pool in the center.
hmm
It's just so well conceived. I would love to try my hand at like conceiving of something like that in my brain and then putting that into action in like the sandbox mode in Planet Coaster. So I'm really hyped for Planet Coaster 2. I bounced off the first Planet Coaster pretty hard because I just could not vibe with the path building tools.
hmm
But if they manage to iron that out, then I think they've got something good. So we'll see.
Yeah, Park Builder games are their own world, and now I know Frontier's been knocking it out with the Jurassic World ones. And two felt great. I really enjoyed two. I know Frontier's had some up and downs. I think they tried their hand at an RTS that wasn't. It was like a Warhammer one. I think I actually played it, but I can't remember something Age of Sigmar. I think that one kind of was a little bit of a dud, but um, sticking with the coaster stuff, I think yeah they've got some really really good um, like ground to tread on.
Yeah, they did Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin.
Yeah, and
Um,
I only know what I know from Warhammer from watching the live streams, but it did sound to me like Age of Sigmar is not a popular setting for Warhammer in the first place. So like I think a lot of the Warhammer people just kind of didn't jump on it, and then that led to it kind of being a so-so RTS and not really getting a lot of the the push that other games have. So
Yeah, that's a shame because um, I would really, I want Frontier to be able to do good things, and
hmm
I think their strength lie in the simulation and management genres, and their attempts at branching out have never really
yeah,
borne fruit. They
because
go Jurassic World. So go ahead.
what what's interesting about Elite is once you get past the space trucker, it is a sim game. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it is a simulation game where you're buying rubies on this planet and trading it for waste on this planet and then selling it for whatever you're kind of like doing those sorts of economy management things. And I do agree that's really where I think some way Frontier really shines. So
Yeah, and apparently they've been knocking it out of the park with the F1 Manager series. So,
yeah.
good for them that they keep building things that people like. Hopefully, Planet Coaster 2 continues that streak, fixes the stuff about the first Planet Coaster I didn't like, and makes something really rad. Speaking of things that are rad, last game I wanted to talk about is Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, which I don't think I've talked about on the podcast before, despite having
No.
been playing it for several months. So this is the Suikoden with Blackjack and Hookers that is being made by Rabbit and Bear Studio, comprising several veterans who worked on the Suikoden series. This has been debuted to kind of mixed reception, in part because it was really, really buggy at release. They've ironed a lot of that out now. In part because people just kept comparing it to Suikoden and saying it fell short. As someone who's never played Suikoden, this is my first introduction to Suikoden likes. With big apologies to PT, if you're here. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
I think it's charming. I think it's well written. I don't think it's particularly deep, but it's not really going for depth. It's going for political intrigue, and I think that's fine. It's funny. It's weird. There are lots of not exactly laugh out loud moments, but charming chuckles here and there. And like I said, it gets really weird, and weird in a delightful way.
Wow.
I just met a race of desert dwelling pirate sharks that, instead of sailing on the open water, sail across sand dunes on land boats. That's just rad.
Yeah.
And I
I
like
I
having. Sorry, go
I,
ahead.
I like that in my JRPGs. I do like when they get a little bit out of the comfort zone of, hey, we're gonna go to this kind of vaguely medieval town and do this, go to this, the evil church, and I like when they branch out. And I think it makes those types of just even any type of RPG a little more fun if they're breaking some of the molds.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do get a little bit of that. Okay, we're going to medieval, a town that's modeled after medieval Germany, a town that's modeled after medieval Japan, a town that's modeled after medieval China. You get a lot of that. But there is just enough of a layer of weirdness and uniqueness on top of everything that it just works really well. The one downside that I have with this game is that its progression feels very sluggish.
Mm.
So I'm just going to compare this to Xenoblade. Xenoblade is a 1, 2, and 3 are bizarre games in that they're teaching you new mechanics at hour 100 of 120. So you are learning new things up until the last 10-20% of the game. But you never feel at any point you're missing out on anything. Anytime you get
how long is it? Just generally
a Xenoblade game, anywhere from 100 to 200 hours.
okay, so you're talking a hefty, if you're still learning stuff 40 hours in, it's a hefty experience.
Yeah, you are learning stuff with 20% of the game left to go.
Okay.
Eiyuden is, I think, structured similarly. But the way that Xenoblade does it, you never feel like you're missing out at any
Okay.
point. You never feel like you're missing mechanics that you should have. And with Eiyuden, I always feel like I'm missing tools that I should have at my disposal.
Yeah.
And like I could see this especially in like there's a base building component to the game, and you can see all the components on your base building tree that you can't access yet. And you're like, well, that would really change my ability to play this game. Too bad it's like 5 levels down the tree. So
Hey, it sounds like Diablo.
yeah, it's a little bit frustrating in that regard because
Yeah.
like functionally it's not doing anything different than Xenoblade. It's just that Xenoblade is very good at depriving you of things without making you think it's depriving you of anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas this
Now,
game, you can see like right in front of you what you're being deprived of.
so is that where do you think it's getting that from? That kind of sounds a little bit like a Genshin type inspiration, right? Where do you think it's getting that from, or is that just kind of like part of the DNA? I don't know enough about it. Is it part of a series or?
I mean, this is the first. There's like a prequel that was a 2D action RPG. This is effectively the first mainline game of the series.
Mhm.
I think it gets this from old school JRPGs.
Okay.
If anything, I think Genshin draws from the same lineage as opposed to this game drawing from Genshin.
Got it. Okay. Because I know that whole like we're gonna kind of bury the the some of the story behind not necessarily paywalls, but that seasonal aspect of releasing things. I think it gets that hype level going a little bit. You know what I mean? But for
Yeah,
me, I want the whole. That's kind of what I was getting at a little bit when I was saying, especially with RPGs right now. I kind of feel like waiting for the equivalent of like the game of the year right now because it's hard for me to feel like I'm getting half of an experience and trying to tell myself, oh well, I'll go back 4 patches and 2 expansions in, like I think both of us really enjoyed uh Starfield, right? So for example, but like
yeah.
now that there's a DLC coming out, I'm trying to like gauge like, do I want to wait for this DLC? Do I want to wait for 2 DLCs? Do I wait for all the DLCs? Like when is the time to come back, basically,
Oh,
right?
that DLC looks cool, but I have no
Oh yeah,
time to play it this year.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'm playing it probably next spring.
but then then some patches hit, and then oh they do this with this build, then they nerf this, and it's what I mean. Like it just kind of feels like RPGs used to be the set in stone, what you bought, and when you brought it home, it was 99%. They weren't gonna what I mean mess with it, right? Shooters were the games they patched and balanced and stuff like that, and now it seems like we're seeing that with RPGs, which typically had been like, nah, what came out in the box is what the game is, right?
To
Um,
this game's credit, it's pretty well balanced to begin with. The reason it's getting so many patches is because it's technically a train wreck.
no, okay.
Like they're just patching up bugs left, right, and center. Particularly on the console versions, the PC version has weirdly been very stable,
Okay.
and that's where I'm playing it. So I'm like, everyone's talking about how broken this game is, and I'm like, I haven't run into a single bug yet. I have no idea what you're talking
damn,
about.
alright, yeah.
But they are like patching it a lot. There's a DLC like roadmap. I don't know if that's going to come with major changes to the base game. I hope not, because what's here is already like pretty well balanced. But it is a game that I think was released a little too early. It needed to bake for a little longer. So I get what you mean. Like the stuff sometimes, like especially as these games get ever more complex, have more moving parts, more stats. It's really hard to balance them until they're out in the real world, and that might be the trade-off we just have to live with if we want games
Right,
of this level of complexity.
like it's kind of one of the things where like I don't ever want to say like, yes, don't give me free stuff, right? But typically, right, when the RPG came out, it was, yeah, this is the game. This is it right here. Go play this, and whatever you experience, there might be some patches that fix bugs and things like that, right? But we're not going to go back and patch in quests, right? That's craziness. That's, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, they're not doing that here, thankfully.
Yeah. So I think that's what's kind of changed for me lately is like I kind of feel like Baldur's Gate, I had a bad experience with that game because of when I played it, and I feel like had I waited, I would, or if I had been a little slower in beating the game instead of just letting it consume my life for a week, right? I would have had a lot of the experience the rest of the internet had, who had a better time with it because they played it a little bit slower than me, and by the time they got to certain things, they had been patched and fixed, right? And it didn't feel so weird. Like, hey, I'm Gail. I want to go hook up right now in the tent in the back. No, I hate you. Don't talk to me ever again. And
I think that might be why I'm enjoying this,
yeah,
because I'm playing it so slowly that's getting patched as I'm playing it.
that's interesting.
So,
Yeah.
like, I'm having this experience where I got in on the ground floor at the same time as everyone else, but because I'm playing it maybe once a week, I just keep dipping in and out. Like, it keeps getting fixed as I keep playing.
Yeah, everybody's
So,
hitting that broken whatever at a different
yeah.
time, and it just so happens
And I'm
to
just
be
never
2
hitting
months
it
ahead of you.
because
Yeah, yeah, that makes
they're
sense.
always patching ahead of where I am. So, I don't know, maybe this is the right way to play an RPG, is just play them super slowly.
Play
Hey,
those,
I did that with
play
Persona
those,
5.
yeah, play those
I, s-
140-hour games super slow. Just devote
like,
the next 6 years to it.
I've done that kind of thing before. Like,
I did that with
I've
Tactics.
told this on the podcast
Yeah.
before. I did a cross country move in the midst of playing Persona 5, accidentally left the disc in my PS4 during the move, and it somehow arrived intact in Los
Yeah,
Angeles.
I have a GBA somewhere in my house with like a 999-hour save of Final Fantasy Tactics, where like I literally stepped on traps for probably 50 actual hours to de-level my character so that I can absolutely break my stats. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that is stuff that I've done. So I get it, but yeah, I mean it's just a weird feeling right now where like when Dragon Age hits, do I want to wait or do I hit Dragon Age at the when it launches so I can get all the story beats, or do I want to wait for a month or two to get for those patches to start hitting and not have to run into some of the bugs and stuff, you know? It's just weird. That was never a consideration for me with RPGs before. Now it kind of feels like it is.
With Veilguard, I think my attitude is I can wait because I don't think it would be. I'm just pessimistic enough about it
Hmm.
that I don't think it would be in genuine Game of the Year contention for me. So there's no pressure for me to get it all done this year.
Yeah.
And I think, weirdly enough, that's going to make me be able to enjoy it more because
Yeah.
I'll be playing it as it's getting patched.
Yeah, I think too with Veilguard, I suspect that the story is going to be a little more micro tailored, based on some of your choices, like Baldur's Gate was, right? That I don't think it's going to feel as uncomfortable if you just don't hit it at the same time as everybody else.
Yeah, I really don't know how I'm going to feel
I
about
have no
Veilguard.
idea, man. It's
It's
gonna, yeah, it could be
all
Game
the
of the Year or it
previews are
could be a
so
flop.
positive,
Yeah,
and then everything that's released to the public just repulses me.
that's because I don't. A lot of the journalists that I do read, who I don't generally consider like, I don't know, shills or whatever you want to call them, they were like, "Look, this game does not look or feel this bad when you're playing it. It's just something about the way they're showing it, or I don't know how they're showing it, what they're showing." I mean, like we talked about it when we saw the not E3 version of it. It's like, why are they showing a level 1 character? You know, clearly like the first 30 minutes of the game with no skills, running around basically hitting one button. Bad look, right? But everybody else who seemed to sit down and play it for a couple hours is like, nah, this game's great. Like I remember someone saying like this game could come out now and be good, and that was like 3 or 4 months ago. So I'm really curious to see what ends up actually hitting the door. And like I think we've all kind of had that moment right now with Dragon Age. I think we talked about it last time. It's more of an action game than we remember. Because I went back and I played a couple hours. I beat most of one, and then I played a couple hours of two, and I was like, yeah, actually, this does feel more actiony than I remember. I remember it being a very tactical, pause-based game, but I mean, even in through like parts of Origins, I was like, nah, I mean, I can just click on this stuff and go to the next room. This stuff is a joke, right? And I found myself
Yeah,
doing that more and more in two, and I was like, okay, maybe I was wrong about this, and this isn't
I
a big
think
change.
it's because the specific ways I broke all three of the preceding games
Mm.
were so not action oriented, they so revolved around combos and commanding my party,
Right.
that for me, they're so non action that the shift to full action feels bizarre. But if you pursue certain party builds, especially in Inquisition, that game becomes a full on action game.
Yeah, that's what I really
Like if you
noticed.
go
Yeah.
like Knight Enchanter or Warrior,
Yeah.
Like I actually did go Knight Enchanter, but the way I'd set up my combos made it easier for me to like play it less of an action game.
Yeah, because I mean, I was definitely like dying or getting low or getting my ass beat in fights that I shouldn't have because I was just kind of flying in, right? And I was like, the game probably would have, rewarded me had I been a little bit more careful here. But nope, I just kept going for it. But generally speaking, the action was enough that it was forgiving me for doing that. I wasn't feeling like I was, I didn't play it on the highest difficulty. I don't remember exactly what difficulty I played it on. But it was like the one below the highest difficulty. And I think, one thing maybe that Dragon Age doesn't get enough credit for, they do a really good job with their difficulty levels. I feel like higher difficulty doesn't just feel like, gigantic health pools that don't do much. So I had to be a little more tactical and use some crafted items and stuff. Whereas, when I played 2, more or less, I was just like, yep, just let's do this. This is easy. But yeah, I know we're gonna probably talk about it because both big fans, but up right up until release, I have no idea what the hell that game is gonna be when it comes out.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll end up like at some point in 2025 doing an episode on it because
they're like,
I am going to be
saved BioWare, or this is it. It's gonna be one of the two.
I think regardless of the result, I'll be like almost academically fascinated in the game.
Yeah.
Like if it's really good, I'll probably be fascinated by its rich thematic depth or what have you. And if it's kind of a flop, I'll be really interested in picking apart exactly why. I think it's going to be the reasons are going to be deeper than they went full action.
Yeah,
I
don't think it's going to be the combat. I think it's gonna hinge on the story, and I think that's where it's going to be. It lives or dies, and I will say from what I've been seeing in a lot of the previews, they're getting a lot right for me. I mean, it's a big step making the party not. I think the term they use is kind of cool. It's not player sexual, right? Like they're not just all around there to just kind of fall in love with you, which they tinkered with in Inquisition, of course, right? But I thought that was kind of an interesting way to kind of go with it. Like these people are friends, and you're there too, and they have their own story, and you're a part of it, but you're not literally controlling them and making their decisions for them and stuff like that. So,
right. My understanding is that they're literally player sexual in the sense that they don't have any preferences.
Right.
You can romance anyone who's romanceable, but it's kind of like Dragon Age 2 in the sense that everyone kind of has their own agenda.
Yeah.
And if they kind of come together for a common purpose, it's not like you're all under the same institutional umbrella trying to accomplish the same goal.
Which I do like in DA2, especially because it leads to some of that like rival man stuff. Like, yeah, I'm helping you, but your goal isn't my goal, so we're gonna get this done, and then I don't really care what you do, Sebastian.
Yeah, go back to church, dude.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'll see on that one. I think it's coming out in November. What do you think?
Ooh, I am also gonna say November because there's a big RPG coming out in October that's going to have some audience overlap in Metaphor Refantasio. So I think they'll probably want to get it out in November. So they're not kind of competing against that. Now, I think Metaphor Refantasio is going to be a gigantic hit, but I think it's going to be a Persona-sized hit. So,
cool.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's keep the good news train rolling before we derail this train.
Yeah, jump off the cliff.
Oh yeah, eventually this train track ends and it's just driving straight into a ravine. But before we get into that ravine, just 2 days ago, as of this recording, some really unexpected news broke. The Korean publisher Krafton acquired Tango Gameworks and the Hi-Fi Rush IP just out of nowhere.
Yeah, I saved it.
Yeah. I was under the impression that the studio had already officially shut down a month ago. So I'm not entirely sure what this entails staff-wise. Have they said, hey, if you worked here previously, you have a job again?
Come on back, yeah.
Yeah, come on back. I'm assuming some of these people have already found other work, either in the games industry or somewhere else in tech or art. But we know John Johannes is coming back, the guy who directed Hi-Fi Rush, and I believe also The Evil Within 2. So that's good news.
I'm it's really cool story, and I mean, I think we've all kind of gotten used to like the Netflix Save Our Show campaigns and stuff like that. And I mean, not to say that some of the other studio shutdowns, you know, were good or anything, but like I kind of got Arcane Austin a little bit. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
but
Arcane Austin had like bled so much of its talent in the development of Redfall. You gotta wonder whether that studio was capable of producing something on the level of Prey again.
right.
I mean, I think they should have been given the chance. Don't get me wrong, but
I agree. Yeah, I'm not saying
yeah,
but
like they couldn't. Like it was not the same studio that built Prey, which is one of the best immersive sims ever made.
If they looked at the studio and they said, okay, well, like you guys kind of did your thing and got it out the door, but like, this isn't the studio that we're kind of looking moving forward with certain things. Maybe they just don't have a good fit for things. I get it a little. I did not get Tango Gameworks. It just didn't make sense.
Because aside from Shinji Mikami, I know they lost Ikumi Nakamura. I know they lost Shinji Mikami. But everyone else was still there. Like everyone who was their proteges, like you still had John Johannes, you still had the guy who took over the direction of Ghostwire Tokyo when Ikumi Nakamura left. You still had all like the art leads and the programming leads. Like all those people were still there.
No.
That is still a lot of talent that is used to working together.
Yeah.
And that is not something you throw away lightly. So I think it's a really good idea to rescue a team that works well together.
And I was also thinking it's kind of interesting too to see a Korean publisher buy a Japanese studio, right? That just kind of feels cool in some ways, like kind of that cross culture. Yeah.
Krafton does not. Krafton only so far has one Japanese studio, and it's a PUBG spin-off studio. Mm-hmm. All the rest of their assets are either American or Korean, with one exception that's Finnish, Neon Giant that made the Ascent. But otherwise, they're just in the States. Yeah. Otherwise, they're just in the States or in Korea. Yeah, you did like the Ascent.
Yeah, I think I was I was an early adopter to the Ascent. I really enjoyed that one. The kid came out around the Cyberpunk time-ish. Maybe not exactly the same, but same vibes. Man, I like that one.
Yeah, same general time period. I mean, there are some concerns about Krafton. They're very, very heavily invested in PUBG.
Yeah.
And if PUBG falters, one wonders what their financial situation will be.
Maybe they recognize that, and this is kind of, you know what I mean?
This is their attempt at diversification. Like, let's get out of PUBG, just doing PUBG and gacha. Let's put our eggs in a few more baskets. They tried previously with Striking Distance, the studio that made the Callisto Protocol, and that was kind of a flop. Yeah. So it's hard to know whether they can't manage these kind of big single player AAA projects, or whether that was problems with Striking Distance in particular.
Sure, but I mean, I think
up until the release of Callisto Protocol, Glenn Schofield was very well respected in the industry, and then it just kind of all fell apart. And he started kind of putting his foot in his mouth when talking about the Callisto Protocol and the work that was done on it. So I don't know.
Maybe the answer is for some of these studios is instead of putting it all in a one AAA basket, a bunch of AA stuff, and I think that's why Tango makes sense. I think Tango made sense for Microsoft to keep, much less anybody else. So I'm kind of glad for them to find a home, honestly.
Yeah, like more stuff on the scale of Hi-Fi Rush. Like Hi-Fi Rush 2 does not need to be much bigger than Hi-Fi Rush 1.
Yeah.
That game was already the right size. They don't need to do anything bigger than Ghostwire. They can keep with these kind of mid-sized single-player games. Charge less than $90. Don't know what that is in freedom money. They can charge a little bit less for these experiences, like around $60, let's say.
The more the economy kind of sits where it's at, I'm not saying it's gotten better here, at least, in Fredonia. But, the more it's kind of sat here, I do think there's a really weird thing going on. This might just mean this, but there's a weird feeling between $69.99 and $79.99 right now for me. I don't know why. Mentally, I'm like $10, man. It's not that big a deal, right? But it does feel a little different, right? And I'm wondering if that sweet price of $39.99 ends up being a winner for a lot of those, like, because $29.99 used to be the new $39.99, and then now the $79 is the old $69, right? So I'm wondering more and more about that $39.99 price point just being kind of a winner in terms of, like, I'll take a chance on this, and if this game is great, I'll stick with it. Obviously, Game Pass, that's where they live, but um, I don't know. It's weird to kind of see, um, you know, more and more studios kind of put it all into one spot right now with these AAA games. Where if a AAA game crashes and burn,
like an independent studio is going down with it.
Yeah.
Like we've seen that with, unfortunately, the Ascendant Studios that made Immortals of Avium. That game bombed, and that studio is like downsized and been cut to ribbons.
Not that bad a game. I think they kind of they didn't do a great job advertising it and telling people what it exactly is. I loaded up on Game Pass. I had a pretty good time with it. It's got some slick presentation, very good facial capture as well. So little things there and there. Avium might have been something where I think if they'd have stuck around, or if they had the ability to, it might have came back around with a an expansion or two, or a little bit of a refocus. But I think not selling it as a fantasy Doom was their mistake. I don't think I tell that to people. I'm like, yeah, it's Hexen, it's Heretic, and I don't think a lot of people got that from the ads, and that's what it is. So, like,
yeah, they made it seem like really drab fantasy Call of Duty.
Yeah.
I think that was a mistake. I think they should have gone for the more fantastical angle, shown off a little bit more of the humor. Apparently, that game is also very funny.
Yeah.
So I think they should have shown off more of that personality. Like, not like MCU quips a second kind of haha funny, but like, show a bit of that dry humor.
Yeah,
show a bit of like, there's so many environments that are so colorful from what I've seen.
Yep.
I've bought the game, but I haven't had the chance to load it up yet. So I'm really excited to see the stuff they didn't show off in the trailers. That was so like, why was everything so beige?
Oh yeah,
in the trailers?
And then the game you play is nothing like that. And the same feeling I got when I was playing the Doom remakes is the same feeling I got when I was playing Immortals of Avium. And I tell people that, and I'm like, nah, man, it's like Doom. They're like, what? Like nobody believes me. They think I made it. I'm like, nah, it's more of a Doom clone than it is like a Call of Duty with magic. I don't think a lot of people got that vibe from anything that they were showing. So, but sometimes you go a certain way with marketing and it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So.
Yeah, like I think Doom with Metroidvania components is a much better sell than Call of Duty, but with funky colors.
Yeah.
Speaking on the price point thing for a second, in Canada it's really interesting because when you move from the $79.99 price point to the $89.99 price point, with HST charged on that price, on the $89.99, you're now into the triple digits on what you're actually paying. And that's a huge psychological barrier.
Yeah. It's a mental
when you're paying, it's a mental thing. Like entirely, that having that one extra digit makes you think, holy shit, I just spent over $100 on a video game. Whereas when what you're paying with tax is in the $90 range, you're like, whatever, I can afford it. So
it's
like,
the same thing here with
a huge block.
If you start looking at, for example, like not like Game of the Year, but like the pre-order with the season pass like version of games, right? That's clocking in at $99.99 now. So same kind of thing, right? And I'm looking at like, wait, do I need this? Is the season pass worth the 30? I didn't used to ever do that when it was $89.99, and it's that, you're exactly right, it's that triple digit thing,
Remind me, do you have sales tax in North Carolina?
Yeah. So
okay,
ours
that'll do it.
7.5%. Now, here's
ours is 13% total.
Yeah. And also we're in the same. So sometimes they don't. If you can get around it, like if you can say, "Oh, actually, I'm from Washington," but they've figured that out, where you're getting that sales tax either way. I actually used to play when I lived in Washington State. I paid more sales tax because I was in the same state as Valve, so I had to pay sales tax on that because I was a Washington resident, which is kind of funny. But that was under the old rules. But no, I mean, there's something mental about that third digit, and even if you're not really hitting that third digit, that 80, 90 price point just feels weird.
It does, yeah. I will say one dirty little secret for those of you who are in Canada. If you buy a game off Fanatical, they do not include sales tax in the price. That might not be fully legal. So this is not me ratting out Fanatical to the feds. So, CRA, please don't go knocking on their door. But if you're a gamer, go ahead, buy your games off Fanatical, and don't tell the CRA about it. Let's move on to some less happy stuff.
This one hurts, man.
Yeah. Let us talk a little bit about Bungie. So, we're recording this on August 13th. A couple weeks ago, on July 31st, Bungie put out an announcement on their official website announcing layoffs and restructuring. Just to summarize, 220 roles are just gone. That's about 17% of Bungie's workforce at the time. 155 more roles were transferred from being under Bungie to being directly under Sony Interactive Entertainment. And then an unspecified number, additionally, were going to form their own spin-off studio under SIE to work on an action game incubation project. If you do the math, it comes out to probably around 75-ish employees are going over to that. On top of that, key figures like Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy, who are important figures first on Destiny, and then Luke Smith was working apparently on a spin-off of Destiny that was in third person called Payback. That got canned, and so those folks left. So it seems like a lot of bleeding has happened, and it leaves people wondering about what the state of Bungie is going to be going forward. It's rumored that Destiny 2, now they've done their big conclusion, the final shape is only going to get like episodes or like seasonal content now, is my understanding. No more big expansions.
Kind of been hinting. Kind of like one or two small type things, free. Now they say free, but I'm sure they'll work a couple passes them to that. You know what I mean? But it does kind of feel like the end of the life cycle. Now, to people who played D1, this feels familiar when they're kind of like, hey, we're going to stop developing D1. It's going to kind of enter like maintenance, mode. Like you're going to get little things here and there. There's still going to be patches and things like that, but basically anything new is done for D1. And that kind of feels where it's going with D2. And I'm on record. I think the flop to end all flops is going to be Marathon. I do not see that game at all taking off the way they want it, right?
Yeah. So the reporting is that their big focus going forward will be on Marathon. It's pretty much all hands on deck for an extraction shooter based off an old IP that was a single player shooter.
And not a very successful one at that. I mean, it is not their Halo. Very, very weird thing to put everything in on. I think it's the death knell of the studio. Honestly, I do not have any confidence in Marathon. I play
if it's well made.
Yes.
Extraction shooter audiences are small and very fickle.
And the entry for Bear is super high, and when you get those people locked in, that's pretty much your audience forever. New people do not jump into extraction shooters because it sucks. Like, you want to play against some guy who's been doing the game for 5,000 hours and has every thing in the world, and you're trying to extract versus him, and you're with the starter kit, and it's just it's a huge mistake. I think a lot of Destiny players kind of looked at final shape as like make or break, right? And then the feeling in the Destiny community was, holy shit, they pulled it off. They got it. They nailed it. Final shape was very well received. It was, the train is on the right track. They figured it out. They're putting it all back together. They had to lay off some people on the way, but man, the extra time they gave it to cook everything, it paid off. Destiny is saved. Bungie is saved. Nope. The exact fucking opposite, right? So that felt like a little bit of a betrayal, right? The Destiny, because we were told like, hey, go buy this thing if it's good. If it's not, hey. But then it was good. We bought it. We did what we were supposed to do. And then I think,
So yeah, funnily enough, it sold less than Lightfall.
yes, yeah, and I think that's because Lightfall put a lot of people off the game. You know what I mean? And
I mean, on top of that, like inherently, the player base is just going to dwindle.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's no onboarding process for Destiny 2.
They said about Destiny was that they didn't like that their player base skewed older. I took that personally, of course. You know what I mean? But like, I think the thing is, it's a 10-year-old series. Of course it is. You know what I mean? Like, there's a little bit of common sense to me that's saying, like, if you've been around this long, that's kind of the people. But also, like, they knew.
It means the player base aged with the IP.
Yes, exactly.
And maybe it means that you don't have an audience that is going to play for 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
But it does mean you have a dedicated audience that's going to come back week after week. After they're tired of taking care of the kids, or they just want to veg out for the weekend, they'll fire it up for a couple of hours.
And it's also an audience that
you have that reliable revenue.
Right. The difference between, a 40-year-old me and a 30-year-old me is a lot of fucking money. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's what it feels like. I don't know why they would kind of not realize that that's actually, in some ways, that's a strength of an audience to have and not a weakness, But there's so much about Bungie that just doesn't make sense. And the community I hang out in a very large Destiny clan. We're pretty active. I haven't been on in a week. This news actually kind of like took all the wind out of my sails. But, the feeling is kind of like, is it Sony or is it Bungie? Now, none of us are really ever probably going to, I mean, Jason Schreier, he's got hooks in there, so he might actually be the one to figure it out, right? But the feeling I get is that Sony bought Bungie for parts, right? And Bungie was not making the money that they were going to do to be able to stay afloat, right? Because they were going to all these other different projects that are now canceled. They didn't have the cash flow to do it. Sony came up with the Brinks truck, $4 billion, of studio purchase, and they probably couldn't say no to that, honestly. Like, I don't know, exactly who's in charge of there, but that's a lot of money.
Yeah, 3.6 billion is like, apparently $1 billion of that was employee retention.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
and then what's the first thing Pete Parsons turns around and does? He lays off a bunch of people.
Yeah, buys the cars.
So much for retention, right?
Yeah. So I think the employee retention part was because at the time Sony was planning, I want to say it was like a dozen live service games.
Yeah.
And slowly those went out the window, one by one by one, right? So now what happens to Bungie? You bought them to do exactly this, right? And now
I literally wrote in our notes LMAO, Concord, and Foam Stars.
Yeah.
Does anyone care about Foam Stars?
Nope. Nobody cares about Concord.
Is anyone looking forward to Concord?
We couldn't get people to play the fucking free beta. You know what I mean?
I know.
And so now you've got Sony, I think, who's like, I'm not like, Mr. Business or whatever, but there's that term where like, you're not exactly taking them over, you're buying them out, but you're giving them almost impossible to reach, standards to get to, or otherwise you're going to basically do kind of like a board takeover, right? And I think that's what Sony, according to the rumors I read, that's what Sony had in there. They're like, hey, if you're not profitable or at this level or blah, 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 we take you over, right? And now
I believe that was reporting from Rebecca Valentine on IGN, but I'll have to double check for that.
So Bungie's played kind of this like chicken game before with their owners, right? Where they've been able to buy themselves back out of contracts, right? I think they've done it twice,
So they were owned by Microsoft. Yep. They bought themselves out. And then they were in a publishing contract with Activision that they managed to dismantle.
Yep. So I think that there's probably some like, okay, now we can't do that with Sony. This is it, right? We've bit off more than we can chew. We're basically owned by them, and we can't hit the metrics that they want us to at this point. So what do we do, right? And the answer, it seems to look like, is we just kind of slowly fold. I cannot believe internally that they think Marathon is the savior of the studio. It might not have been Destiny, but it's definitely not Marathon. I can tell you that 100%. I feel like a lot of those, I mean, even well-made, big-name studio extraction shooters are dead on arrival. You know what I mean? And this one does not feel like it's got anything behind it anymore, because it's not the Bungie that made. It's definitely not the Bungie that made Halo, and it's barely the Bungie that made Destiny. So what are you at this point, right?
What I've heard is, at least from reporting from Jason Schreier, is that internal sentiment on Marathon is not highly positive. Oh. It's not clear whether that's general pessimism over its business success or whether that means the quality just isn't there, but there's not a lot of confidence in it, unfortunately. The other thing I'll point out is, and then, like, just with a grain of salt, someone who has not played more than like 4 hours of Destiny 2, from what I understand, as far as like the basic mechanics of that game go, extremely well received. Like, Destiny players are super happy with that. But the overarching design is something that people have, like both Destiny players and Destiny non-players have a problem with. And in the sense that ongoing players have, problems with progression and other things. And non-players are like, I would like to get into Destiny, but I watch a bunch of cutscenes and I'm dumped in the middle of some story that's like 75% of the way through the original campaign, or something like that.
Yeah, and as someone with like 4,000 hours in Destiny, the new player experience, I think it's gotten better, but it's still not great. I think that's a problem. But I think the main problem with what I've seen Destiny is almost exactly what I've talked about with Diablo, right? Every season brings a new, level creep to it. We get more and more and more powerful, and if you weren't along on the journey, now you've got all these little weird things that pop up that are important right now, but that were never
so like it's not just new players, it's even a problem with player retention, right? So if you're the kind of player who doesn't play it every week, you dip in every time a new expansion comes, you do the content, and then you leave to go play other things and come back for the next expansion. You're lost even with all the seasonal stuff and ongoing maintenance that they've done on that game.
And I mean, like I said, we'll have people in the clan, hey man, I'm gonna take a season off. It's not unheard of in Destiny to just be like, it's more like a cold turkey thing, if that makes sense. You almost just don't play it rather than kind of like dip your toes in, because the stuff that you're gonna invest your time in is basically so fleeting, right, that it's almost not worth even dealing with, because it's just, why bother, That's not very common, in a lot of other games, right? Like, it's like, like I can jump into Fortnite and maybe I missed some skins the past couple of years, but it's, and the guns have changed up, but it's still Fortnite, right? Destiny, it's different. It's its own animal, and it's hard to keep that many people locked in forever. And the only game I think that's ever managed to do it was World of Warcraft, and that had about the same lifespan, right? By 2016, people are like, all right, I'm either, going to make this my full-time job, the only game I play, or I'm moving on. And a lot of people were like, yeah, I'm moving on. And World of Warcraft had that almost the exact same kind of exodus, right?
The difference with World of Warcraft being it was so hyper popular that even a mass exodus
didn't do anything,
keeps it afloat. Whereas the Destiny 2, extremely popular, but A, larger percentage exodus, B, starting from a lower baseline.
Right.
So that large exodus means you don't have players putting money into that game anymore.
So I think what we're looking at almost definitely at this point is some type of Sony takeover, right? And I think Pete Parsons doesn't give a shit because he's got his cars. You know what I mean?
Okay, let's talk about Pete Parsons for a sec, because I think this really deserves a bit of analysis. So yeah, his classic car buying habit, like he buys cars at auctions, is what went semi-viral. And the dude owns like 20 cars, and it's like, dude, you drive one car at a time.
Yeah.
Well, do you have more than one car? Like, I recently bought a car, and I'm just like, why did I buy that?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine having like a car that just sits in my driveway. It almost like drive me crazy. Like, honestly, just thinking about it.
I haven't driven that car I bought that car 2.5 weeks ago now. I haven't driven it in like a week because I usually bike to work. And I'm like, why did I buy a car?
It makes sense in a couple months, I think. But yeah.
It will once. Like I don't bike in the snow.
Yeah.
And like I generally take public transit if I can't bike, but there are going to be days where I'm just going to hop in the car and pay the $10 I have to pay to park my stupid vehicle. It's honestly like a grocery run vehicle more than anything. But yeah, like the classic car buying habit. That's what went viral. But I think it's kind of focusing a little bit on the wrong thing in the sense that it's an illustration of how profligate this man might be, but I don't think it gets to the heart of what's so galling about what he's done. Like, this is a man who, when given an extra $1 billion in like studio funds upon acquisition, did not really use it to retain talent. Used it to, like, I don't know what he did with it. Like, looted the studio, played it out to the execs. It's not entirely clear because we don't have access to Bungie's books. Only Sony's overall books.
The thing I kind of think of over and over again is I just wonder if he knew this was kind of Sony's thing all along, right?
Oh, like, this is all, like, determined from the outset, in the sense that when Bungie signed the contract, they would have known what conditions there were to maintain control of the board. What I don't think Sony anticipated was having a CEO who wouldn't want to leave and would prefer to loot the company or like burn it all down and lose control. Because what he's doing right now, it's bizarre. Like, if this man just cared about money, he would take a buyout and run and maybe start a new studio with venture capital funding.
Right.
And like being a, 2 years ago, a well-respected industry vet might have been able to make that happen. At this point, his name is Dirt.
Yeah.
He can't like strike out on his own anymore and start a new studio if he really loves making games. Or if he really loves money, he should have left earlier before his name became Dirt. So I don't know if it's like a weird sense of control and ownership that he feels over the entire studio, that he feels like he has to be in charge. But this is not the way to make a lot of money or to make games.
Yeah. And
like, if either of those impulses are what drives him, I have no idea why he's still
feels like
CEO.
You're writing a line between two things that neither makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, neither one of the options I think makes sense in terms of like, so okay, he loves this studio so much he can't, okay, well then, the second you
why are you burning it down?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Where's the talent going? It's not the studio that you love anymore, even, right? So okay, well then what are you even saving at this point, right? Like, it's the name. I mean, okay, I don't think Sony cares that much about the Bungie name as they do the IPs, but even that's kind of like, if you run Destiny into the ground, what do you got left? Marathon? That's an unknown, and they just had a game a lot like Marathon just completely flop, and yeah, I think Sony wants their $4 billion back, and they're going to get it in the talent of Bungie just going out to, all these different studios and stuff, which sucks for the people who are, kind of like redundant, because I think those are the 220 who got laid off, or probably couldn't find a fit for them somewhere else, but
to me, like, most of the people who, like, of the 155 are, my understanding, more like technical employees,
like network engineers and stuff,
like network engineers, designers, people like that, and it's a lot of the art and like community management and stuff like that got laid off. And artists and writers still went to school to learn a craft, right? Like, they did art school, they did creative writing school. They learned how to do very specific things and do them very well. And if Sony's in the business of making narrative-driven games or beautiful-looking games, it seems very weird to throw out that talent as well.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of gets to perhaps what the focus of Bungie was as a studio. Maybe a studio that overvalued, I shouldn't say overvalued, but valued art and writing maybe less than tech and design. Not that you'd see it in the final product, because both are excellent. It would be like upper management not really valuing the art side of
the first people that they let go in the very first round of cuts that like the entire community was like, wait, what? Was Michael Salvatore, who is an excellent. I mean, Marty O'Donnell had left Bungie a long time ago by that point, but excellent.
That guy's a weird dude.
Yeah, I understand why. I'm not gonna lie, but Salvatore was kind of like his protege, and I mean, like next to its gunplay, the music in Destiny was top tier. Everyone, I mean, even in the worst, awful seasons, people were like, yeah, it's got everything sucks and all this stuff is wrong, but man, that music kicks ass, right?
Oh yeah, like I do not how Destiny plays at all.
Yeah.
I love how Destiny sounds.
Yeah, and he was one of the first let go in that very first round, and so I think that's kind of telling in some ways. You know what I mean? That they looked at his talent level and whatever he was getting paid, and were like, "Nah, we don't need that," and that sucks. But
the other big guy they let go of in the first round was their legal counsel, who'd been with the company for years. And this is a company with a lot of very complicated legal contracts.
Yeah, I mean, they were suing.
It's not easy to outsource that expertise.
It's very odd that kind of the way things rolled down felt very like, especially the very first round, felt like we're not making games anymore. Right, it was that those were the kind of people that were going and like, hey, we're just kind of like what was the studio that like was that like Raven Studio? I think they make nothing but like Call of Duties now, you know what I mean? Or like Red Storm that used to make all the original like Rainbow Sixes. Now they just do like tech support on Division. You know what I mean? Like those types of feelings of like okay, this is kind of where we stop off at as a studio. But to think about that for Bungie is wild. You know what I mean? And like I love like Red Storm probably made like a lot of my favorite games of my childhood. But to see that happen to Bungie, just it's like on a whole other level, right?
Yeah, I mean, 155 employees are going to be like still based in the Bungie offices, but they're going to have an SIE label instead of a Bungie label under their names. And what are they going to be doing? Probably consultation on the multiplayer and live service components of other Sony games. I mean, it's good that they're keeping that
right.
Yeah.
So, what are you actually?
I mean, the one big hit they had was not internally developed and not expected to be a big hit. That was Helldivers 2.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like Foam Stars, flop.
Yeah.
Concord, gonna be a flop. Fair Games, if it ever comes out, I guarantee that will be a flop.
Even Helldivers is in a weird spot. I mean, their community's in revolt again. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like it's
What's
like
at
a
this
cycle with them. They nerfed flame damage, which was basically their, so they were like, more or less what's going on with that game is they kind of overdo nerfs to weapons, and they need to have viable ways to do the harder levels. Because a lot of times they'll remove your like cooldowns, which are half the ability damage, and then if they make the weapons also not do damage, you're just kind of end up running around, and that is not the kind of game that feels good if you're just running away from enemies. It's not part of the fantasy of a Starship Troopers type game. So, but this time, so a lot of the weapons they sell in expansion packs, right? That's the main way to get weapons in Helldivers. But the thing is, you don't know if the weapon is any good until you buy it. And then if you do buy it and you start to use it, because, well, of course you will, they nerf it. So that's a bad feeling, right? Either the weapon's bad or it's good and then we make it bad. And then what am I paying money for these, content drops, basically? It's not like in Destiny where weapons drop from, random weapons. They only come from that one source, basically. So really odd place. I think the community is like they always kind of do these like little weird like in-game things. So I think they're purposely letting the robots get to Earth, which is kind of like not supposed to happen. And then a lot of people thought that there was like some kind of background sim, like being run where like, oh, X amount of players are playing, so this is the the challenge is why. Ended up no, it's just literally some guy. He's like, and he's been fudging some of the numbers so that things do or don't get accomplished. And so people are kind of like, well, none of this shit matters because, next week you can just tell us, well, okay, we'll kill 1 billion bugs. Oh, you couldn't kill them? Okay, well, never mind. You don't get the cool reward or whatever. So lots of problems with that game on own. And what's so funny is that's the kind of shit you buy Bungie for. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of shit Bungie could fix, right? They've had experience with like, oh shit, we took way too heavy of a hand to this thing, or maybe let's let this play out for a month, or let's let the weapons come from somewhere else other than the thing you have to pay money for. But what all that goes to say, I don't even know if they're bothering about to talk to Bungie about this. It doesn't feel like it right now.
Yeah, I would guess it's a little bit harder for an external studio like Arrowhead that SIE doesn't own.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like Sony can't say, "Hey, we're your publisher, and we're gonna, go, send in a strike team of like a dozen
Yeah,
workers to help
yeah,
out."
balance guns or something. Yeah,
Like, Nintendo does that all the time.
yeah,
They did that. Like, Pikmin 4 was mostly developed by a studio called Eiyuden, but you still had a bunch of Nintendo staff going in and supervising that thing. That game turned out fantastic. I don't know why Sony can't do the same thing with Arrowhead and Helldivers.
it's so weird, man. It really is. So many of the choices that are being made, like not just here, but like just again across the whole fucking industry, are like, what are we doing? like, it's like everybody's learning weird lessons all the time, and then we forget them and relearn them all over again. When Sony bought Bungie, I was like, man, this is probably it. Like that, because everything I read wasn't we were buying Bungie for their fantastic IP Destiny. It was like they have a lot of experience as world leaders in the live services realm and stuff like that. That was kind of the language that they were saying, right? Industry
Yeah.
leader this, world leader that, stuff like that, which you're not really telling me about the game. You're telling me about, the network engineers and the tech people who I guess now you kept and then got rid of everybody else who, also made what they did a video game instead of like a tech demo. Um, and I don't know. I mean, I thought the writing was on the wall then. It's like kind of watching it happen now still hurts. Um,
Yeah, and like, not to remove any blame from Pete Parsons and his C-suite, because I think they really do deserve the bulk of the blame
yeah.
here for all the horrid mismanagement Bungie has been subjected to over the years. But like, it was Sony's idea to bet big on live services,
Yeah.
and when that bet didn't pan out,
Yeah.
it's not Bungie's fault that Sony made a bad bet. Like,
And the
there's
time,
less of a reason to keep Bungie around to consult on live services if you've gone from making a dozen live service games to like 4.
yeah, and the timeline of it wasn't like, oh, over the past 4 years we found out that this isn't working. It was like, no, they got kicked repeatedly and severely in the junk, finding out that no, nobody wants to play these games. You know what I mean? And it was a
Yeah,
very
and
expensive and visible lesson, and they reversed course in months. Um,
like, essentially Jim Ryan left, Herman Helst and Hiroki Totoki take over, and they're like, what the hell was Jim Ryan thinking? And they're the ones who reversed course.
yeah,
And like, here's the really infuriating part. Jim Ryan is now making public statements along the lines of video games are too expensive
yeah,
and development is
I saw
unsustainable. And it's like, my dude,
Yeah.
you're part of the problem.
think
You're
it's
the
coming
one
from?
like approving gigantic budgets
Yeah.
for games like Uncharted and The Last of Us. And now you're turning around and telling us video games are too expensive to make?
Yeah.
That like you're making these huge bets on like expensive live services and it's not panning out. These were bets that you made.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily something that's ever been something that audiences have been like, you know what we really love? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, hey, can you make every single thing a live service game? No, I mean, Destiny was an exception in that world, right? People loved it and stuck with it, and found ways to make Destiny part of their gaming rotation or whatever you want to call it, right? They always made sure that it fit in if they were a fan. And I think Sony didn't understand that part of it and thought, wouldn't it be great if we made only one game and people played it forever, right? Like it's foolish.
It's
It's
such a like the really logical thing that they don't seem to realize is single player games don't necessarily have to compete against each other
Right.
because
Yeah.
you can always put a single player game in the backlog and get to it later.
Yep.
You cannot put a live service game in a backlog
Is that you
because
end
at
up
a certain
with me in
point you're just
Diablo?
missing out.
Yeah. 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 Like,
Yeah.
what the hell am I doing with this Paragon shit? And like even like timeline wise, people got backlogs. And people might not to get to stuff the day it comes out. Single player wise. So you gotta allocate for a game to have a lifespan, not just a launch.
Yeah, and like for single player games, maybe that matters less. But if you're going to go into live services, you are planning not just a launch and then a tail. You are planning several years of content
Because
all in one go.
when Bungie launched Destiny, they said this is going to be a 10-year cycle, or like saga or whatever. And people laugh at them like you're fucking crazy. That is not a thing, right? They pulled it off. It is incredible that they. I mean, you can still look at Steam. It's not as popular. And I mean, we're talking about sales numbers going down, but I bet you Destiny's in the top 25 of games being played. To pull that off after 10 years is wild, right? I mean, CS:GO being the exception, of course, because it's kind of like a. I don't know. I don't know who's still playing that, but I feel like it's like a million Chinese bots or something running around getting like helmets or you know what I mean? Like I don't know who, but
From what I understand, a lot of Russian and Swedish teenagers.
really okay. Because I thought it was just people doing the gambling stuff, like getting the boxes.
Oh no, people play that game
Okay.
and then they gamble on it. Like,
Yeah,
it's interesting. You see that Destiny's been really successful, and like by player metrics, sure, but like look at the cost it took to get them there. Like
And the
1,300
ups and downs.
employees. Yeah, how much money was poured into that thing? Like this is what you need to make a successful live service game in terms of player metrics, and it's still, after all said and done, might not be financially
And
successful.
like you had the backing of when they were under Activision, there was like 4 studios at the time working on Destiny. You know what I mean? There was like a PC optimization, there was this, there was that. I mean, like you need to put everything into one live service game to make it Destiny. And Sony was thinking they were going to do 12. Yeah, like it's wild. It was like
Yeah.
the hubris. And
Each Destiny
yeah,
requires 1,000 people to build
And the-
and maintain.
the
Like, are you going to go hire 12,000 employees
oh,
to build this?
and the people paying for it aren't the Bungie CEOs, and it's not the Sony CEOs. I mean, Sony's playing with their bottom line, but it's the rank and file of Bungie who probably could have told anybody who would listen, if you're not going to go all in on these live services, don't bother, because they lived it. They went through it. They probably saw like, holy shit, like we have a mocap team that has to do work every single month, whereas most of the time these mocap guys are only doing it once period for the game, right? Little things like
I
that.
mean, mocap is kind of done over the course of development very often. But yeah, it's not like constant production ready mocap.
Right. Needs to be
Always
ready
like in
to
your
go,
mocap cycle.
because we've got a
Yeah.
new season coming out in 6 months, right? So that's kind of like the little things that I'm sure, like Michael Salvatore being on staff. Hey, how often do you need to come with 15 new tracks for an expansion? Not very often if you're not doing a live service, but they have these guys on
Yeah,
staff.
like
you know,
most studios don't keep a composer on staff.
right? Yeah,
Right.
unless you're like a game dev story or something. But yeah, it's when you start to think about those costs and those people, like it becomes very, 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 very clear that either you're all in or you're not. And I think the thing was that, like, I think Sony wasn't all in. I really don't think they were. And I think they started to. I think probably what happened was they bought Bungie, and Bungie's like, look, this is what this is going to cost. This is what these studios
Like, are you prepared to pay
Yeah.
for it?
And then
Like,
they
why do you think Naughty Dog canceled their Last of Us multiplayer
Yeah.
game?
No.
Because Bungie told them it wasn't viable. It might have even been coming together nicely.
Yeah.
And then like Neil Druckmann was very candid. Hey, we would have had to put our entire studio doing all their efforts. We would have become entirely a live service studio. We could not make the single player cinematic adventures we became known for if this is all we were doing.
And it's a reinvention
And
of the studio.
they didn't take that poison chalice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's right. You have to reinvent to say, hey, guy who made art, world class, art for Last of Us that you had, 6 years to complete. I'm sure there was crunch and stuff, but now I want you to do that, but I want you to do it every 2 months. You know what I mean? And like a lot of those people are just gonna probably say no, number one, right? And then, okay, well now what do? Do we hire a team of people to do what this one guy did over this time, or where does it start and stop? And you got Papa Sony supposedly footing the bill, but like you mentioned, their first party games are flopping left and right too. So, maybe the money dried up. Maybe they saw that the genre wasn't going to work. Maybe they didn't want to commit to it. But the people paying the price aren't Sony, and it's not Pete Parsons for sure. It's what I mean. The people who got laid off because they just got deemed to be what Sony didn't, what they wanted, they thought they wanted, and then they didn't all of a sudden.
Yeah. It's a real disappointing situation all around. It's not like any of these guys are going to be, any of these people who got laid off are going to be buying expensive classic cars at auction.
That must have been a real kick in the teeth, man.
Yeah. Like, I know I said I didn't want to focus too much on it because it wasn't really what Pete Parsons was doing wrong. But at the same time, dude, you don't need more than a couple of cars.
Yeah, you
got one, your wife can get one. I don't know, maybe you give some cars to your kids. You do not need 20 cars. Where are you going to store 20 cars?
Yeah.
Beyond 4 or 5 cars.
It's more expensive.
Even if you have a mansion, beyond 5 cars, you have a storage issue.
So I used to do
where do those go?
Support, speech writing and meeting engagements and stuff like that. So I worked for a whole bunch of executives, right? We were a mutual company though. We weren't, like a company with stock and stuff like that, right? So the executives were super self-conscious about even wearing expensive suits or ties or stuff like that, because that's the impression that people kind of walk away from, right? Oh yeah, this guy in the the $1,000 suit, of course he's going to be telling me we need to make these tough cuts. And so sometimes it is, the message is hey, don't be telling me we're having to make these tough decisions and blah blah blah, where you're filling up a garage that you bought of cars. It's crazy. Don't do that, right? And look what we ended up with, right? The messaging was bad. It's the one thing that people seem to be running with all over the board, hey, this guy's studio is failing, he's buying garages worth of cars.
It's like the game dev equivalent of couch fucking, except it actually happened.
Now, I'm not sure couch fucking didn't. I like that. I like to keep my options open just in case, because I don't know.
I think what's so funny to me is that it's not even morally wrong if it did happen. Yeah. It's just
it's weird, and that's why
it's just. I don't even care if he actually did it. Cool. I think that actually makes you seem relatable.
That's why the weird thing is hitting so hard, I think, as an attack. I mean, we're getting way off base here, but I think the weird thing is...
Let's just go around this road.
Yeah. I think the weird thing is hitting so hard because you can't defend that it isn't weird, right? No, it's normal. No, it's not normal. It's weird. And then it sticks, right? Oh, shit,
Right.
It's weird.
It's not only that it is weird, it's that it's weird and they do not like being called
right.
weird.
Yeah. So it's like
if someone calls you weird because you're running around in a sock costume at a furry convention, you're yeah, I am weird and I'm proud. But if you're presenting yourself as an all-American wholesome dude, and someone's you fucked a couch.
What comedian?
That you're
weird.
weird.
A comedian who's I think it was probably John Mulaney, but he talked about how accurate kids can be with their insults. You know what I mean? And it's almost always that kind of stuff. Nah, that's stupid. And you're shit, it is stupid. You know what I mean? It's because my kids will do that to me. I'm God, the shit they say, they don't mean it to be mean necessarily, but it is sometimes devastating, right? You'll plan a really big vacation trip, we're going to the beach and we're doing this and we're doing that, and it's this sucks. I just wanted to be home watching TV, and you're damn it, that, and it puts you in a funk, right? And I think that's why weird works so much, because it's you can't escape it. You can't escape the feeling that shit, they're right. It is weird, But yeah. Anyway, that tangent.
I have a story along those lines. So one day, this is back when I was living in New York. One day I was just walking down the street, and there's like must have been 2.5, 3 years old kid holding his mom's hand, and he just points at me and says "bald,"
Oh no.
because I shave my head, right?
Yeah.
And I start laughing. And then the mom shoots me a dirty look, despite the fact that her kid insulted me,
Yeah.
because she's like, you're teaching, like, almost as if to say you're teaching my kid a bad lesson by not being angry.
Yeah. Yell at him.
But I found it so hilarious.
Yeah.
I was just like, I wasn't even mad. I was just like, you go, kid.
Oh, no,
you tell it like it
There's
is.
definitely
Yeah,
times
bald.
where like, my kid will do something. My wife will, like, you can't laugh. You got to punish him. I'm like, it's too funny. I got to laugh a little bit, and then I'll go yell at him not to say that again. You know what I mean? But it's usually the stuff that him and his brother yell at each other, and it just ends up cracking me up because they're learning how to kind of like insult each other. You know what I mean? So they'll just scream something, to each other from the top of the stairs, and I'll laugh for 30 seconds. I'm like, don't say it to your brother, and like, all right, fine, Dad, act like you didn't laugh about it. But no, it's tough, and I think that's why weird is devastating, and I use it all the time now. But yeah, anyway, what would have been a good thing is if like maybe there was like some kind of print magazine that we could read about the downfall of Bungie. So surely in my next issue of Game Informer, right, I'll be able to read about some of these issues, right? Tell me nothing's going on there.
Yeah, I think if you were to walk into your local neighborhood GameStop, it surely hasn't closed down in the past few years due to the death of physical media and horrible labor conditions and horrible mismanagement and general lack of merchandise in store. You could just walk into that store and buy the latest issue of Game Informer featuring the cover story for Dragon Age The Veilguard, which totally is coming out any day now. And, EA won't at all be mad because their cover story that they paid a lot of money for is totally coming out.
This sucks.
You could do all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this sucks, right? It does suck. Oh, God.
I was the weirdo. Speaking of weird, I was the one who would always like whenever I would renew my GameStop card, I was like, nah, I still want the magazines. I just like to read them. I just like kind of toss them on my counter and read them. It's nice to read. And one thing about Game Informer that maybe some people like, I think a lot of it was, it's the GameStop magazine. Of course they're gonna, but no, I thought the writing in it was really good. I thought they did a good job on a lot of their articles. Their reviews were always very fair, and it was kind of weird that there was a magazine you could flip through in the store and be like, oh, that new game came out. Oh yeah, this magazine that you guys sell is giving it a 5 out of 10. So, but they did it. That's kind of ballsy, in some ways, right? To sit back and say this thing isn't good, even though we sell it and we make a lot of money off of it, right? Were always brutal on Madden. I think before a lot of the other journalists felt comfortable kind of taking on that juggernaut. And I was always appreciative of that because there was some real bad years of Madden, right?
Right.
And Game Informer had no problem calling them that. But yeah, I mean, the pettiness as well of taking everything offline and all that other stuff. Just, man, I don't know.
Yeah, so what they did was they shut it down abruptly with like no advance notice, did not let Game Informer publish its last issue, which was, my understanding, almost entirely done. Who knows what their contract with EA looks like at this point for that cover story. Old content is no longer viewable from the website. Most of it, thankfully, has been archived in the Internet Archive, but all the old print issue content, I guess people have to hunt down print magazines and like preserve them in an archive. Hopefully the Video Game History Foundation is working on that. So that's 33 years of games media history just kind of flushed down the toilet for no reason.
And it's that kind of like farewell to youth moment too, because I mean, I was like a Nintendo Power. I was a Prima guy. I like to read about video games. I still do. It's like I don't think there's a way to do it. I mean, obviously, you're reading on the internet, it's the same thing, right? But it used to just kind of be like that. There was an industry of writing about video games that was pretty good in a lot of ways. And
like leafing through books and magazines on
Yeah.
games. Like, I still enjoy doing it. I bought Jordan Miner's Video Game of the Year. Like, it's sitting on my bookshelf right now in view of me. I didn't even like that book, and I do not regret buying it one bit.
Yeah.
Because I want to support this kind of writing on games.
Yeah, and it used to be like there was almost too many magazines, right? There was EGM, there was PC Gamer, there was, and now it's just, man, nothing.
Like, what's left? Just Edge?
Yeah, maybe.
That's it.
Yeah. And
I guess Famitsu in Japan.
there's probably the
And that's-
Eurogamer. I feel like they had a little bit of a longer tail. I don't know. Maybe.
They didn't have a print version.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. So it's just like Edge, a couple of other magazines in Europe, Famitsu. Nothing else is really putting out print versions of stuff. Like, I mean, there are some indie magazines, like some zines and stuff like that are getting some wider circulation. But yeah, in terms of mainstream, you don't have that much anymore, and it's really, really
Yeah, it sucks.
disappointing.
It was cool, always just cool, just like, to get the feeling of like a new PC gamer with the demo disc and stuff. And I get that's some boomer shit, but it's a feeling that I don't know that you're going to be able to replace by just going and reading something online in between 10 billion ads. Ugh.
And like, there have been attempts to kind of replicate the magazine in digital form.
Yeah.
And that's what, say, Polygon was when it launched. And like, there's so many articles you read at Polygon where they hired like a layout artist, and as you scrolled through, it would do fancy effects, and like reading the articles was a visual treat. And I guess it's just not affordable to keep doing that anymore because they so rarely do it
No.
now. And it's mostly just reheated news stories on like nerd media instead of stuff on video
That's,
games.
far be it for me to call anime the death of all of our culture, but it does seem kind of like, you kind of just, like you called it, like it just becomes nerd culture. It doesn't have the hyper specific focus of a lot of games, journalism used to, right? It's just like, yeah, you guys like this shit. You also like this. Here you go. Here's also some MCU stuff and shit. Why not? We'll do something about STEM.
I'm not even against that
I'm not
stuff,
either.
right? So like, but I want to read my MCU stuff on like a movie website or CBR, right? And I want to read my anime stuff on like Anime News Network or Random Curiosity, not on Polygon.
It has kind
like,
of
I
a
go to Polygon for
watering
game
down
news.
effect, right?
Yeah, and like, I want to be really clear. I understand the economics of this. I understand, Steph Sterling has a really good video on this called Games Journalism of Thrones that we'll put in the link dump. And their point of that video is that it is like kind of ghastly in a way, but it's born out of economic necessity. Like, they need the clicks.
Yep.
And this is one of the few ways they can get the clicks. Whereas if you go niche and hyper-focused, you get the people who are visiting your website as like part of their rotation, but you're not getting that SEO.
And that's one of the reasons, like, this is way insidery baseball for people who go to the avocado, but when AV Club started to announce that they were coming back, and there was like, oh, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we're not going to do anything. We are not what they are or what they were, right? It feels like we've created something different, right? It's more of a community than it is a place to go read about movies, right? And I think there's less and less places to go be a part of a cool community than there is places to go read about movies, weirdly, right? Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I wasn't worried that the AV Club was coming back for what it would do for our little site, because that's not who we were anymore, right? We might have started that way, but that's not what it's all about now. So, I mean, good luck to the AV Club. I hope they make it. I hope they turn it around. But the days of me feeling like I need to go talk about a movie to internet strangers and argue with them, I don't want to do it anymore, man. I feel like I spent too many of my years just arguing with strangers about whether or not a movie was good. And then, you know what? It didn't fucking matter what they thought. You know what I mean? Like, it just didn't matter.
Because at a certain point, it's just like, it's fun to talk about video games and
Yeah,
movies and stuff with people. Like we do it all the time on this podcast. But at a certain point, it's just like live and let live,
yeah,
man. Like, you know, uh, I'm never going to love, Souls likes. Most people are never going to love visual
right.
novels. That's okay.
When you've
It's
got a
fine.
community of people and it's like, hey man, I know what you're into. I think you'll dig this. All of a sudden, that recommendation hits a little different, right? Than like, you know, screaming into the void. Don't play Dark Souls. Go play Roller Coaster Tycoon, right? People are like, who the hell are you? Like, it's not, you know. But for us, it's like, oh shit, man, I haven't thought about that game in a while, and I do like that game, and it has a different feeling when you start to develop a community, right? And that's a little bit of kind of where I've been with, at least that specific thing. But more and more, I think that the money is always going to be in the ads and the clicks, like you're saying. But the long-term success is going to be if you can build a community that loves what you're doing. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that a lot of companies just haven't learned yet. That the comments matter. They're not just a place to go and like ignore. Spend a little time talking to
Right.
those people, and that's what you're building. You want people to come back, and otherwise, there's 10 billion places to go talk about everything on the internet right now. Nerd culture websites are a dime a dozen, but one that makes you feel like hey, this is a cool place I can come back to again and again. That shit's a little bit harder to pull off.
Right. The ad supported model that's very light on community is just not
Yeah.
sustainable anymore.
Yeah.
Because people, like, if you're getting a lot of clicks through SEO, the second you get downranked in your page rank, you're not getting the traffic you need to stay
Yep.
afloat.
And
If you build a community, you have people coming back day after day. They're looking at the ads that are next to your article. They're talking to people in the comments. They're spending literal hours on your
yeah.
website. And even if they're not clicking on the ads, you're getting those visual
Yep.
impressions. So either you need to build a community that is coming back to inadvertently look at the ads, or you build a community that's willing to pay you money
Yeah. That's
and
oh
subscribe.
boy. That's the tough one, right? That is.
I mean, some folks have found success with that. Like, you look at, this isn't the written word, this is video, but you look at Patreons like
Mhm.
MinMax, which actually rose out of the ashes of a previous Game Informer layoff. You look at Kind of Funny, which is mostly ex-IGN folks.
Giant palm guys, right?
Oh yeah, Giant
Yeah.
Bomb now going still pretty
Yeah.
strong. Well, they are corporate
Yeah.
owned.
Now, yeah, but it's kind of a
Yeah, when they
full.
first when Gerstmann broke off from them,
Yeah.
broke off from GameSpot to form Giant Bomb. Yeah, they were their own independent thing. So you have all these like groups of people. They're doing some mixture of writing, mostly video content, who are supported through Patreon. Oh, or like Remap Radio, which
Oh yeah,
recently
yeah.
launched. I say recently; it's been I think a year now, and they do great content. Funnily enough, you mentioned sports video games and Game for giving them a fair shake. I think Remap is one of the few like quote unquote intelligent game outlets that is actually like critically analyzing sports video games. Like they'll spend a lot of time talking about the ins and outs of like Madden versus EA college football and how the different mechanics create different game
Oh,
feels and stuff like that.
I've been raging against college football, so I might have to give that a listen. It has absolutely drove me bonkers the way that game is.
I think you'll find they come down pretty positively on the game, but I think you'll find the discussion they've had in the past few episodes really fascinating. In how like I think the thing they've been saying about it is that with like the NFL, I mean, obviously some players are better than others, but there's kind of like this baseline, and like the variance in player skill is pretty low.
Right.
But when you go down to college level, you have some folks who are like, the second string on their high school football team. And you have some people who are like future NFL stars, and they're playing together in the same league, and the skill gap is
Yeah.
gigantic. And they kind of realistically reflect that in the video game. And it might be entertaining to watch as a college football enjoyer, but to actually play that
Yeah. Oh, it
is a
sucks.
very different
Yeah.
story.
It sucks. That's exactly where I'm at with it right now. I'm like, man, I got to spend 40 hours making my guys study because I can't make the field because I've got bad grades, but also I'm not practicing. You know what I mean? And it's just like this kind of like never-ending, painful, like you know, like what do I do today with my game time or whatever?
I mean, that guy, like, I mean, it's realistic in a way.
Yeah.
That guy is not, that guy is not going to play in the NFL. He's probably going to graduate, then do a certificate in business administration,
Right,
and then
yeah.
go work for some company, right? And you know, maybe he'll have a successful life that way, but it's not going to be in the NFL.
Yeah, but gamifying that, oh boy, that is not a fun proposition, right? It's kind of very like, okay, well, it's almost like a life sim rather than a football game at times. So I think if you're signing up for that, maybe not too bad, but man. Anyway.
Yeah, like, man, I just want to play some football.
Yeah. Like my character didn't get to play football in a football video game because he couldn't get on the field. So you're like, what am I actually playing?
Like at that point, just take the football out of the game and make me experience classes. I'll actually learn something. Like, oh yeah, I thought I was gonna play this college football game, and I ended up doing a semester of biology.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I know how cells work.
Yeah,
Mitochondria, my friends. Yeah. Oh man, like imagine you go in to play a football video game, and then 40 hours later you're submitting a term paper on like regional politics in Thailand.
The game's like, look, you're not good enough to make football. You gotta study.
Yeah, you might have a future working for the UN.
You made it. Yeah, no. So yeah, no, like because I was actually playing it with my son, and it was on like a timed demo, right? Because I wasn't sure if I was gonna buy it or not. And he was like, "Dad, when do we get to play football?" And I was like, "Oh my god, we haven't played football." We were doing like little practice things, you know, but it was like in between. It was like, "Hey man, do you want to go to a party tonight? I know Coach doesn't let you guys go out before game nights, but there's going to be a lot of girls there, right?" And I'm like, should I go to the party? And it's like, what is it? It doesn't fucking matter. I'm not going to play tomorrow. It literally does not matter. And, you know, but like you're making decisions. It's very weird. So yeah, that was my experience.
But like, imagine you inadvertently giving your son like AP credits while he's trying to play a video game. He comes in on like the first day of high school. He already knows calculus.
Put it down, man. We got to figure out this test. All right. We might not get the field.
Like,
but
I gotta differentiate this function, Dad. I don't have time to toss the pigskin around.
Yeah, that was my experience. I think it was like a 5-hour demo, but by the end I was like, yeah, because the fantasy I think for create a player in NFL Madden is obviously like, hey, I get to play my character. I get to go play on my favorite team, and I get to be around my heroes, my football heroes. Whereas in NCAA, everybody's like computer generated anyway. You know what I mean? So there's some name and image likeness stuff, but if you play more than one season, you're basically taking over for the people you actually like, and you don't even get to play with them. So I don't know. It's the football was really weird too. You can't actually pick plays until you gain coach trust. You spend all this time sucking up to your coach, like showing up to practice and not going to parties to gain coach trust, so you can call plays where you actually get to do something if you do make it onto the field. So that was kind of an interesting spin on a football video game. Remember, I was playing a football video game.
Yeah, and instead you're playing like Persona with a little bit of sports thrown in.
I don't have time to hang out with my friends and study for the test. What do I do? That's actually what it felt like. So,
I mean, that is kind of brilliant in a way. Like, imagine you took a Persona game and you took out all the dungeon crawling and replaced it with like soccer or football or baseball.
I mean, it makes sense because that's what it felt like I was playing. I honestly felt like I was playing an RPG more than a football game. But man, I laughed so hard when because you know, you're kind of you're playing the grind, you're doing the stuff. And my kid is like, "Dad, when do we get to play football?" I was like, "Oh my god, we haven't played football in a."
Yeah, you did say earlier, kids are really good at cutting through the truth of something.
Oh yeah, I think we're playing football in this football video game. But yeah, I mean, Game Informer, man, it really sucks. It feels. I know it feels obviously, way worse than, but it does feel like it's kind of like definitely my end of an era for that feeling I would have of like going into a GameStop, hanging out, looking at the shelves, picking up a weird used game, a controller that breaks in 4 hours, and then walking out with a Game Informer. Now it's a meme stock. I guess that's Game Informer.
Like, I'm trying to figure out what GameStop's financial decision making is. Like, I don't know if Game Informer was losing money or not. It's hard to tell from the outside looking in. To some extent, it's conflated. Like, the revenue is conflated with the revenue from the brick and mortar stores themselves.
Right.
Because with like certain GameStop memberships, you get access to the magazine. So it's hard to tell whether Game Informer was actually making them money. The other thing they'd get money for would be presumably from paid cover stories, like coverage of Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Who knows where EA's money has gone on that now?
I'm sure EA's like, wait a minute, we just forgot. Where's this magazine that you just canceled? But what's kind of...
Oh, I bet you Andrew Wilson is screaming at Ryan Cohen right now.
What's weird about the whole, how does GameStop make money? I was more inclined, honestly, to get a, what was it, like a Premium Plus, whatever the name of that stuff was. I was more inclined to get that thing when they were offering a magazine. Now I don't buy enough used games to make that whatever that thing is, that card purchase, worth it now. I just it's less attractive now as a member for me to get that thing because they got rid of the magazine. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm probably not alone there. But yeah, I was thinking about that too. I was like, well, if this thing goes away, I really have no reason to subscribe to their program, right? Whatever the hell was that called, like GameStop Premium Cool Dude or whatever.
I don't know.
Yeah. Rewards.
What's it called? Level Up.
So yeah, they changed the name a whole bunch of times.
Fuel. I don't know what it was called. I've dealt with GameStop in 2 different countries.
Oh, yeah.
It used to be like they bought Electronics Boutique over here, renamed it EB Games, and now I believe they just renamed all of those GameStop up here as well. For a while they were doing, for a while after they'd made the EB acquisition, they were doing crazy things. Like in the local mall near where I grew up, they were literally operating 2 GameStops in the same mall.
Whoa. Let them fight.
And it's just like, I've seen malls with 2 Starbucks, maybe.
And that's even pushing it.
Yeah, or like 2 Tim Hortons. But 2 GameStops?
Yeah. No, I'm going to the other one. This one, I mean, because even like if you just think about like the storage, right? Like, oh, hey, do you guys have a copy of Halo 3 used? No, but you can walk 48 feet. They have it. Like, why would you do that? Like in terms of stock, it's crazy. But yeah, man, it's that was even into my 30s. I mean, I would just go more to GameStop to browse. Honestly, I wasn't really buying a lot of stuff. I was keeping my subscription app, active. I was keeping what if I want to eventually get a used game? Then this is a pretty decent deal. But I started to do the math, and then when you take that magazine out of the equation, I don't buy used games anymore. I know people fought like hell for my right to do it from Microsoft, but guess what, man? It's 2 generations later. I don't have any need for used games really. I just buy on sale. That's kind of my version.
I used to buy used games when I was in grad school. Now I earn money. So I don't. But also, like, it's hard to find the used games I want. Yeah. If I want to play a game that I don't want to buy, I'll just borrow it from the library.
Yeah, I think everybody started to do that as well. And then you've got Game Pass, which fills a nice little in between spot where it's like, well, I don't want to buy this. Maybe it shows up on Game Pass. If it's not on there in 6 months, then maybe I'll grab it, right?
Yeah.
And then usually by 6 months, it's nice and on sale, or it's got all the patches that you're gonna want, and then you get to play it for like an actual better version. So,
And also, we're like PC game players, so we'll just
yeah,
buy stuff on online
yeah,
sales. And then we'll play it on our PCs at half the price. And, maybe we're not playing it sitting in front of our nice TVs or what have you. But it's still there.
yeah.
I'll gladly play it on my monitor.
Having gone into a GameStop in probably the last 3 months, if I had to guess, it's a very weird place to be right now. It's like
50%
Funko T-shirts, like just like random, like like card games that nobody really like. Maybe people collect. I don't know, but like it doesn't have the feel of like a card shop would. Because I go to comic places still, and it doesn't have that kind of feel. It's just like, buy this Super Mario trading card game, but it's really about the trading cards, not the game, because nobody actually plays the game kind of feel. It's a very odd store to even go into.
I think they kind of needed to do that to stay afloat, because just selling the games in an era of the death of physical media, they're not going to make that much money doing it. They need to sell merch where the margins are much, much higher. Now, how many Toadstool T-shirts can you sell? I don't know.
But I think this is something people will get. Stores have a vibe. Stores have a feel, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like when I go into GameStop now, the feeling I have is like desperation. Like, please buy something. Like more than like any other store I've ever been in. Obviously, all stores want you to buy something, but the feeling I get when I walk into a GameStop is like, what do you want? Just tell me. We'll We'll drive you to wherever it is. Please buy something. It's a very like untethered feeling. Like the second you walk in the door, it's you feel it. You feel the desperation.
You can sell that alt merch, but you have to have confidence in it.
Yeah.
Like, this bobblehead is just as important as the disc video games in the corner.
Right.
But it has to have a place of presence, and there has to be intentionality behind that sale.
Right.
It's not just everything you're throwing at the wall. It has to be like, we are a store that sells video games and video game merch.
Yep.
And we care equally about both.
But like, so if I wanted to go buy a Destiny hoodie, do you think they'd have it in GameStop? Maybe, right?
They should.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, Destiny's pretty popular in spite of its financial woes.
To GameStop right now on the off chance that they would, right? So that's the problem. Like, that's what you're saying. There's no intentionality to it. Took my exchange student.
They can barely even stock new video games.
Yeah.
I remember they did not have Control in stock when that game launched, which is insane. What are you doing?
I didn't even think this was that like small of a game, but I went to go get Alan Wake 2, like not exactly when it launched, but like kind of around there, and they're like, "Yeah, we're getting another shipment." I'm like, "Oh shit, man! Like, what year is this? Like, you know what I mean?" Very odd to have someone.
Didn't Alan Wake 2 only release digitally?
I don't know if it was Alan Wake 2 or if it was it was something around that, because it was a Control like game. It was Quantum Break.
Yeah. That released on disc.
Yeah, so it was Quantum Break, and that wasn't that long ago, right? But it was well into like, we don't have supply chain issues. There's no like midnight launch thing, right? Nope, didn't have it. But very odd these days to go into GameStop. Just the feeling in there is a desperate, please buy something. And there's no intentionality. It's such a good way to put it. I brought my exchange student there. We were just in the mall, and I was like showing her the mall. And Spencer's Gifts has anime shirts, but so does GameStop. And then you got a couple other weird places that just like fit all these like general, like the websites we were talking about, just general nerdery. But none of it is like committed to any single fandom or anything. It's just like, yeah, we've got a
especially with the anime stuff, unless it's an anime property that's also a prominent video game property.
Right.
What is the reason that stuff is there? Like, I'm not going to GameStop. I might go to GameStop to like buy, I don't know, a Scarlet Nexus shirt because it's also a video game. but I'm not going to go to GameStop to buy a Delicious in Dungeon shirt, right? Because that's like just an anime.
Well, they had an entire section
or it's
of
originally manga, but you know what I mean.
they had like an end cap of One Piece, and it was like One Piece figurines and One Piece this, One Piece that. I was like, is there a One Piece game? Like I legit.
There are plenty of One Piece games. They're actually pretty prominent One Piece games.
But they didn't. They weren't advertising.
But were they even selling the One Piece game though? Right? Like you need the synergy, right? Why are you not selling the latest One Piece game next to the One Piece shirt? Why are you just selling the One Piece shirt? Selling the One Piece shirt.
I'm guessing it's
GameStop was making me so bad it's tongue twisting me.
I'm guessing it's because I think there was a show or something that was coming out, But
it was the Netflix show, the live action show.
Yep.
But that's a really good opportunity to push the damn video game.
But
get it?
If you're a video
you're not
game
going to sell
store,
a lot of copies, but like, put a few dozen of those boxes out alongside like. This is your opportunity to say, experience the video game that inspired the Netflix classic. And then people are you are going to get a couple of curious people who are like, yeah, that sounds like a fun time. I want to hang out with the video game version of Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates. Let's do this. That's literally all I know about One Piece. That is about Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates. I don't know anything else about that.
I know that One Piece is real because my kids yell that at me every now and then.
The One Piece is that like the opposite of the cake is a lie?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's like their battle cry for some reason. I don't know. But no, GameStop. It's. But I guess the stock makes people rich, so maybe that's what the goal is. For
not anymore. That stock has come back down to earth.
The gigantic piece of my childhood now relegated to a meme stock. So, but I will say this: going to the mall culture is kind of back, man. I was seeing a lot of mall rats, and that's the best way to describe them. And I say that with honor because that's exactly what they reminded me of. They had no shopping agenda. They were just hanging out. I was like, man, that was my vibe when I was a kid. So I was glad to see that.
Yeah, I don't know what the culture is down in the States. Up here, there's like barely any hangout culture left because helicopter parenting's like through the roof. So like, parents won't let their teens out to go do stuff anymore. Yeah. Like you can't go hang out with you've got piano lessons. You can't go hang out with your friends at the mall after school or like on the weekend. And I gotta wonder, like, we've lost something.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Not saying that kids shouldn't have activities or shouldn't learn a musical instrument or what have you. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying they should go to the mall and just like
hang out,
look at the board games and the clothes and go to an Orange Julius and discover that orange and milk don't taste good together.
I think there is something though where it's like it's a cultural thing that I'm seeing coming back, and I bet you it's from COVID. If I had to do like some kind of like sociological experiment, I think it was part of that whole like, hey, you can't leave the house. Now the first thing that these kids want to do is leave the house, right? My kid is way more outside based ever since COVID, right? He grinds on Fortnite still, but like when it's on the weekend, he's like, hey, can we go to the pool? Or I'm gonna go outside, I'm gonna go for a walk, I'm gonna go to the park, stuff like that. I think it's kind of a weird throwback to kind of like our childhood, really. So I don't know. It was weird to see them all packed because the last, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times it wasn't like that, but we went on a Friday and man, it was full. So.
Oh yeah. To bring this back full circle, I don't think I would have taken up biking were not for COVID because I just want to be outside on the weekends. Like I just want to go to the park and bird watch. And this past weekend I went to the park to go turtle. I was about to say turtle hunting. I'm not going to hunt a turtle and eat it. I want to go I want to go turtle watching. Unfortunately, I didn't spot any turtles. The turtles are eluding me. They will not show up for me.
Hunting, probably.
Yeah, but like,
they know what's up.
I see the little nest where their eggs are laid. I go all along the river. I go all along the canal, all the bodies of water, hoping to see some turtles, and the turtles never show up. I see those stupid I see all the birds. I see the
Yeah, you should do it.
mallards. I see
Feed him
the
some
American
peas.
black
I
ducks.
heard you should feed him some peas.
I should feed them some peas. I mean, also, I thought you were saying I heard you to feed them some
Oh
geese. I'm
yeah,
like, the geese are bigger. The geese are, if anything, going to eat the ducks.
yeah. You guys can
Canada
take those
geese, by
things
the way.
back, man. Oh my god, we get them here.
I don't, we don't want them. Yo, like, okay, so most birds, if you're about to drive a car or ride a bike into a
Oh, they
bird,
move. Yeah.
that bird will move. A Canada goose will play, ironically, chicken with you. Like, those guys do not move. Like, you can honk your horn, you can ring your bike's bell. They are not going to move for you. Like, if I were cruel, I could bike straight into a goose and injure it severely. And the thing is, they think they own the paths. Like, every single path, like bike path, every single sidewalk that's near a park with some open space or next to the water is covered in goose
Oh yeah,
droppings.
their poop
Just
is
absolutely covered.
I don't know how they aren't like invisible with the amount that they poop. I feel like that's all they do. It is crazy how much like because they'll fly like from the like our house is in the path, right? So they'll stop and there's like little ponds and stuff, But like it's like getting carpet bombed. It's crazy. You'll go outside and you're like, how did this happen in an hour and a half? My car is covered in shit.
Like, how much food did
Yeah.
you eat? What do you like? How many young mice did you kill? I actually like. What do geese even eat? I don't actually know what geese eat. Like, I know ducks are swimming around for like those little fish,
Yeah.
right? I know like blackbirds are going around eating insects and worms. What do geese even eat?
Probably hate.
They're just like munching on
Yeah.
grass. I don't know what they're doing.
Childhood
I see them munching on grass. I'm like, that can't be your whole diet, man. You're a dinosaur. You gotta get some protein, buddy. So, yeah. On that note, if you'd like to keep update with the podcast, you can follow us on our website at avocadogamescast.wordpress.com. On that website, we post every episode, and we also post a link dump that has links to some of the stuff we talked about. It fact checks some of the stuff we said. We will find out what the name of GameStop's rewards program is, and we'll put that in the link dump.
It's gonna be something crazy. It's gonna be like extreme PowerPoints or something. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's gonna be like game fuel for your eyeballs. Like, I don't know what it's gonna be, man. But it's gonna have like that Monster Energy vibe.
Yeah, exactly. Mid 90s.
Yeah, it's gonna be like big vape vibes.
Probably.
Yeah, like I would not be surprised if it's like GameStop rewards powered by Juul. You can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or as of recently, YouTube. Just search for Avocado Gamescast. Google Podcasts, dead.
Yeah, we've outlived another. It's like
Yeah.
fourth, right?
So okay, I know we're like ending the podcast, but like, what the hell is Google doing?
They shut it down whenever they feel like it. It's got to be kind of weird to be like a developer, like and be like, hey man, we're gonna start working. We're gonna make apps for the Google Schmoobleplex or whatever, and then you develop all your time and energy. And they're like, never mind, that thing is not gonna take off. Let's just shit can it, Like it doesn't instill a lot of positivity. I was thinking about the other day. So remember when VR was gonna be the next great thing again? Remember there was like Google Glasses, and like Samsung was like selling those things or like giving them out with phones that like you slide your phone in, and like all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh yeah, like that was like a thing. They were gonna make like VR.
Oh yeah, the Samsung VR and the Google Glass are like two pretty different products.
Like the VR, but they were giving them out, at least in the States here. They were giving them out with phones, right? So it was kind of like a
like
like a.
It was effectively like the precursor to Nintendo Labo.
Yeah. And then the Google was doing the cardboard and all this other stuff. So it was like, oh wow, it's like kind of like DIY and stuff like that. And then like Google's like, wait a minute, we don't make any money off of this. Fuck this thing. Like they just stopped making it, And I feel like one of those reasons that like VR kind of just like the cliff fell off is because it was like, well, Google doesn't believe in this shit. Maybe there's nothing to it, But Google doesn't believe in anything.
Yeah, that's like really the AR thing with Google Glass. Like, no one bought that shit. I had a classmate who bought it. You're on a grad student stipend and you wasted your stipend on this?
Well, didn't Apple just make...
Bro, you're going to be eating ramen for a month. What are you doing?
Didn't Apple just make the same thing? And then people were trying to take it back because it had a ridiculously short return period or something.
The Apple VR Plus, whatever it's called. That's a completely different kind of product, though. That's like a full-on VR headset with AR pass-through. But it costs what, a few $1,000s? I'm not paying a few $1,000s for that.
The charging cord is probably a few $1,000 though in Apple.
Look, I have an iPhone, so I can't be a hypocrite here. But at the same time, I actually use my iPhone for stuff. I can't imagine using a VR headset for literally anything other than playing a few novelty VR games.
I'm not spending $1,000 for novelty, This
is $3,000.
Oh,
this is a lot of money.
Yeah, no.
We're in used car territory here.
Speaking of used cars, I got a car, so wrapped it all up.
Yeah, I do have a car. I mean, I paid a lot more than $3,000 for that used car because it's a 2020 model. Yeah, if I wanted to buy a lemon, I could have, just sold out a few $1,000s, and I would have been okay. And it would have been a better buy than an Apple VR headset.
Get you to the grocery store.
Sorry,
at least it'll get you to the grocery store. Apple VR, you can look at food in VR and think about eating.
Oh yeah. I thought you were saying something about visiting the grocery store in VR and or not being able to afford groceries because you bought an Apple VR headset.
I get all my food in the metaverse. I don't know about you. I've evolved past physical sustenance. Just kind of not for me.
Yeah, you just kind of think about food and you're full. It's good.
Go to the virtual Wendy's. That's all I need.
I wish. Before we recorded this podcast, I ate an entire pizza.
Ooh.
That was probably a mistake. Because it wasn't just the entire pizza. It was the entire pizza and the side salad. And because I live by myself, I'm just I don't know how much stuff to put in anything. I'm making a salad. Does an entire green pepper go in that? Sure, why not? An entire green pepper's going in that.
Yeah. And the thing about a salad, if you don't eat it now, you're just throwing it out anyway. So you kind of got to you almost talk yourself into eating it, really.
Oh, at the end, I was this is delicious because I've put the fattoush salad dressing on it. So I've got my nice fresh veggies, my crisp lettuce, my I visited my parents this weekend, so I got tomatoes from their garden, and I got some nice fresh Lebanese cucumbers in there. I'm oh yeah, I'm eating fattoush and it's great, and I prepared it myself, and I'm so happy. And then I get midway through the bowl of fattoush, I'm I know this is good for me because it's all these fresh, nutritious vegetables. But I hate myself for eating this right now.
Yeah.
This was a mistake. And I love vegetables. Don't get me wrong. I'd be a freaking rabbit in another life. Give me a carrot, I'm happy as a clam. But you give me that much vegetable, and I'm just oh god, that meat's looking really good right now.
That's how I
really go for a nice juicy chicken leg. On that note, make sure you check out the avocado at the-avocado.org. It's not a chicken leg, it's an avocado, but it's got that nice fatty flesh that you just spread all over your toast, mix with some lime, what else you put in guacamole other than lime and guacamole and avocado?
Onion, definitely some onion.
Yeah, some onions. According to New York Times, you add some green peas.
That's what you feed the birds. You feed the birds the guacamole.
Feed the birds the guacamole. Imagine you're one of those. Imagine you're a weirdo who goes to the park with a jar of guacamole and a spoon, and you're just going up.
Officer, this man right here.
He's feeding the geese guacamole, and now they're just gonna be
put a dent in your car.
I would either be super acidic and corrode your car, or the shit is green, and you can't tell the difference between the grass and the shit.
There's little avocado trees in their wake.
So, could you imagine, like, the first man to grow an avocado tree on Canadian soil, and I did it because the geese shat it out. Just fertilize that seed in the best way possible. That's not how avocado seeds work. You have to, like, shit out the pit, and I don't think a bird is capable of, like, eating the pit. This got really gruesome real fast, so we're just ending this episode right here at Bird Shitting at Pits. So thank you to everyone for listening, and we will see you all next time. Take care.